I just wanted to get home. But that night, someone was dying.
I lost control of everything.
I stepped into the fire riot without knowing who he was.
And I knew I wouldn't let her walk away. Nothing after that.
Was a coincidence.
It was a freezing night, one of those where the silence in the street seems to hide things that no one wants to hear. Paris quickened her pace along the deserted sidewalks, clutching her grocery bags as if they were the only thing tethering her to the ground, while the sound of her shoes on the asphalt beat in the same rhythm as her obligations. She thought of her grandmother, Mrs. Tyra, and the way she smiled whenever she saw her arrive. It was a brightness that never faded, even with the pile of overdue bills in the kitchen drawer trying to ruin everything. Paris was not one to give up. She simply took a deep breath when things got difficult, and lately, things had been quite complicated, but she found a way to keep going. The wind hit her face with force, but she had already faced much worse storms and remained there whole. "Only 3 more blocks," she said softly, adjusting the weight in her arms. 3 blocks and a bath. "Hang in there, Paris." That was when the noise happened. A violent explosion cut through the air, as if the sky were cracking open. Tires screeching on the ground, glass shattering, and the horrible sound of metal twisting. Paris froze in place, feeling her chest accelerate as if her heart were going to jump out. In front of her, about 20 meters away, a luxury car, one of those she only saw from afar or in advertisements, was turned upside down. Dark, heavy smoke rose from the engine, spreading through the street like a warning that the situation was dire. For a second, she stood there without reaction, her mind divided between the fear of getting close and the desperation of knowing that someone could be inside. The bag slipped from her hands and fell to the ground, scattering oranges across the sidewalk. The bread she had chosen because it was the cheapest ended up crushed in the corner of the street, but she did not even care. Her legs were already running before she could even think. "Is someone there?" she shouted, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear. "Hey, is anyone alive in there?" The silence that followed tied a knot in her stomach, until very softly a sound came from amidst the wreckage. "Help?" The voice was weak, fading between dry coughs. "Please." Hearing that made Paris move quickly, with no time to think about the danger. She flew to the driver's side door and pulled the handle with all the strength she had in her body. No luck. The door would not move. It was completely jammed. "No, no, no," she grumbled, trying again, pulling until she felt her arms burn from the effort. The smoke was increasing and the heat nearby was already uncomfortable, so she looked around desperately until she saw a large stone near the curb. "All right, breathe," she spoke to herself, grabbing the heavy stone with both hands. "I am going to break this, sir. Protect yourself in there." The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and Paris felt a quick cut on her cheek when a shard flew at her, but she did not even blink. She could not stop now. Reaching her hand through the hole, she unlocked the door from the inside and gave a sharp pull. The man was hanging by the seatbelt, his head down and his face dirty with blood. Without losing a second, she released the latch, slid her arms under him, and began to drag his body out. "Cooperate with me here, big guy," she grumbled, dragging the dead weight of the stranger. "You seem to eat well, very well, Jesus. How much do you weigh?" She managed to get the man out of there just as the fire began to lick the back of the car and the world seemed to turn upside down. Boom! The heat wave came like a brutal shove, throwing Paris backward. By pure instinct, she threw herself over him, trying to protect the stranger with her own body, while pieces of burning metal fell around them. The heat was suffocating, as if they were inside a furnace, and she smelled something burning coming from her own arms. When the noise finally stopped, Paris lifted her head, drawing air with difficulty, feeling her heart beat so hard it felt like it would break her ribs. Are you whole?" she asked, trying to catch her breath. The man, whom she could now see better under that orange glow, wore a suit that, even though it was all ruined and dirty, must have been worth more than about 3 months of her rent. He nodded his head, with those grey eyes looking a bit lost, trying to focus on her face. Then something strange happened. When the two of them looked at each other, it seemed as though time hit the brakes. Those eyes, even in the middle of that chaos, fixed on her with a strength that made Paris forget, for an instant, that she was lying on the hot asphalt. He held her gaze for a long time. 1 second, 2, 3. Paris was the one who looked away first, not out of shame, but because it was not the time for that. "You need to go to the hospital," she said, already pulling her phone from her pocket with a trembling hand. "I am going to call the ambulance and—" His hand, which was quite firm for someone who had just flipped a car, caught her wrist. "No." The voice came out hoarse, raspy, but with an authority that was impressive. "No hospital. I will handle it." Paris blinked, thinking she had not heard correctly, and looked from the burning car to him and then back to the car again. "Are you serious? I do not want a hospital." "You just crawled out of a car that exploded," Paris snapped, her adrenaline turning into pure irritation. "You are bleeding. Your head must be all messed up, and you are sitting there acting tough as if it were just a scratch." She crossed her arms and stared at the man. "Are you for real?" The corner of his mouth twitched upward, almost a smile. Even covered in soot and bruised, there was something about his manner that caught one's attention. A dangerous thing. "Just help me get to that bench," he requested, pointing with effort to a spot in the square just ahead. Paris let out a heavy sigh. "Fine. Why not? I have already saved your life anyway. What is one more little favor?" She stood up and offered her shoulder for him to lean on. The guy was heavy, full of muscle under that expensive fabric, and Paris had to use double the strength not to let them both fall as they crossed the street. When they arrived, she practically dropped him onto the seat, trying to catch her breath. "What is your name?" she wanted to know, still suspicious, wiping the sweat from her forehead with her hand and ending up smearing herself with soot. He hesitated. It was quick, but she noticed. It seemed as if saying his own name was the hardest thing in the world. "Benjamin," he finally said. "Just Benjamin." Paris rolled her eyes. Just Benjamin. As if she could not see that clearly expensive watch on his wrist, or the tailored suit that screamed money. Just Benjamin was as simple as a palace pretending to be a cottage. "Right, Just Benjamin?" she shot back with all the sarcasm she was entitled to. "Are you sure you do not want to see a doctor? Because look, you look like you went through a meat grinder. And you did not come out on top." He almost smiled again. "I am sure. And you are going to stay here alone? Sitting there like it is just any other night?" Benjamin said nothing. He just stared into space with a closed, serious expression. One could feel that he carried a massive weight on his shoulders, something she had no idea about, and to be honest, she did not even want to know. "You know what?" she said, starting to walk away to gather her things from the ground. "If you change your mind and decide you want to live, give a shout. I live nearby." She began picking up the oranges that were scattered about. The bread was gone. It was all smashed. "I have to grab these before the neighborhood thinks they are freebies." "Thank you." "Paris." She stopped instantly, an orange in her hand, and turned around slowly. "I did not tell you my name." Benjamin just gave that smile of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. A restrained gesture, almost as if he were ending an official conversation with a nod of his head. Paris stood there for a few seconds, staring at that strange man who seemed to make no sense at all until she shook her head to drive the thought away, deciding that her quota of scares for the night had already been exceeded, and decided to leave. On the way, balancing the torn bags and what was left of the fruit, she felt a nagging discomfort in her chest, that annoying certainty that the encounter with the rich guy who avoided doctors would not end there. When she finally opened the door to her house, Mrs. Tyra was in her usual spot, sitting in the old armchair with her knitting in her lap and her glasses on the tip of her nose, ready to read her granddaughter's thoughts. "You are late, girl," the grandmother spoke, using that calm tone that Paris knew was the beginning of an interrogation. Paris dropped the groceries on the table with force, trying to hide her nervousness. "I had a setback on the way, but everything is fine. You do not need to worry about anything." Mrs. Tyra stopped what she was doing very slowly, in that way that makes it clear she has already caught the lie. "Paris Amelia." She used the full name, which never meant anything good. "You are covered in soot, you have a cut on your face, and there is a tire mark on one of the oranges. So, unless your idea of a setback is a total disaster, you better start telling the truth." Paris let out a heavy breath, defeated, because hiding things from her grandmother was impossible. It seemed the old woman had a radar for trouble. "There was a man out there," Paris began. Her grandmother went back to moving her needles with a little side smile. "There always is one." "Do not start, Grandma. His car flipped over and I just helped." "And you pulled him out of there," Mrs. Tyra completed, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Of course you helped. You were born with this habit of wanting to carry the world on your shoulders." Paris even tried to argue, but ended up staying quiet because deep down it was true. "And what happened after that?" the grandmother wanted to know. "Nothing. He just sat there on a bench, insisting that he was not going to the hospital, stubborn as could be, acting as if he had not almost been barbecued." "I see." Grandma took a strategic pause. "And is he handsome?" "Grandma." "What?" "So what? I am old, but I can still see. I can certainly ask." Paris felt her face burn with embarrassment. "I did not even notice that. I was busy trying not to let the guy die." "Right." The sound her grandmother made it very clear she did not swallow that story one bit. Paris preferred not to stretch the subject and ran to the bathroom to escape the questions, but as she cleaned the dirt and looked at the cut on her cheek, the memories kept coming back. Those grey eyes, the luxury clothes, the way he smiled, and what intrigued her the most, how he found out her name without her saying a word. The next day, Paris woke up feeling her whole body aching, as if she had taken a real beating, and every muscle complained about the effort of the previous night. She sank into her pillow and complained to herself, "That is it. I am never playing the hero again. Next time I will call the fire department and go on my way." But she knew she was lying to herself. The image of the accident and the face of that Benjamin guy would not leave her head, feeling like gum stuck in her memory. She shook her head to see if her thoughts would fall back into place and went to the kitchen, where Mrs. Tyra was already making coffee. The good smell of bread and butter and hot coffee took over the room, bringing a bit of peace to that strange morning. "Did you sleep well, girl?" the grandmother asked, but the way she looked over her cup made it very clear she already knew the answer. "Like a baby," Paris lied as she poured herself some coffee. "A baby that just ran a marathon, but a baby." "And did you dream about anyone, Grandma?" Mrs. Tyra let out a low chuckle. "All right, I will not talk about it anymore, for now." Paris gave a sigh and bit into a piece of toast, thinking that this would be another day of pounding the pavement looking for work. It was always that same discouragement, waking up early, spending the little she had on resumes, going from place to place and hearing the same old excuses. They said she lacked experience, that they were looking for someone with a college degree, or that they would keep the paper for later, which she knew very well was the polite way of saying they were going to throw everything in the trash as soon as she turned her back. But bowing her head was not part of her plans. It was not in the nature of Paris Hollis to give up like that. About 3 hours later, with 7 rejections on her record, she found herself sitting on a park bench, very close to where everything had happened the night before, chewing on a cheap snack and trying to understand where she was going wrong. "How am I supposed to get experience if no one opens the door for me?" she grumbled to a pigeon that was pecking nearby. "Tell me, Lady Pigeon, you who live on the streets must know something." The creature only tilted its head, understanding nothing. "Yeah, I have no idea either." Paris tossed a piece of bread to the bird, and at that exact moment the phone began to vibrate in her pocket. She almost did not answer, already thinking it was a debt collector or someone wanting to sell an internet package. But she ended up answering out of pure impulse. "Hello. Am I speaking with Miss Paris?" The voice on the other end was that of a woman, very serious and professional, one of those who sound as if they are reading a memorized script. "This is Carly Vance from Carrington Enterprises." Paris almost choked on her food. What was that?" "Carrington Enterprises," the woman repeated, now sounding a bit impatient. "We have analyzed your profile and we want to schedule an interview for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Paris felt the ground vanish for an instant. Carrington Enterprises was simply the largest company in the country, the kind of place that had enormous glass buildings, a helicopter on the roof, and luxury everywhere. Are you sure?" she stammered, unable to believe it. "Are you sure it is me you want to talk to? I do not even remember sending a resume to you, and—" "The registration is correct, miss. We expect you tomorrow, The address will be sent via message. Have a good day." And the call ended. Paris stood there staring at the phone screen as if it had just come to life on its own. What was that? How can that be? She looked to the side, searching for the pigeon. Did you hear that, pigeon? The bird had already flown far away with the bread. Paris took off running for home and burst through the door huffing, all sweaty, while her grandmother remained calm with her knitting. "Carrington Enterprises called me. They want to interview me tomorrow at 10 in the morning, and the thing is, I never sent a resume there." Mrs. Tyra finally looked at her and gave that smile of someone who had already expected it. "Good things appear when we least expect them, did I not tell you?" "But Grandma, it makes no sense at all. Why would they call me?" "Perhaps," the grandmother interrupted with a spark of amusement in her eyes, "someone noticed how hard-working you are." Paris sat in the chair, her mind going a mile a minute thinking about the chance to work in a real place, but in the middle of that euphoria, a strange thought began to hammer away. She remembered the grey eyes, the suit that cost a fortune, and that just Benjamin. Carrington Enterprises. No, it could not be true. Or could it? That night, Paris did not sleep a wink, her head becoming a whirlwind of doubts. She wondered if this was some bad joke, if she would be able to handle the job, or if that man she dragged from the flames had a hand in this story. "Impossible." She spoke softly to the bedroom ceiling. "It is just a coincidence, it has to be." Except that deep down, where instinct does not lie, Paris felt that nothing about that night had been an accident. And tomorrow, the moment she walked through the glass doors of that giant company, she was going to find out the size of the mess she had gotten herself into. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a luxury suite, Benjamin Carrington rested in front of a massive window, observing the movement outside. He held a glass, but did not even think of drinking, because his mind was trapped somewhere else. He thought of that steady gaze, of the courage of someone who does not measure danger, of that woman who pulled him from the car and still had the nerve to call him Mister, telling him to stop being fussy. Benjamin gave a smile in the dark. "Paris," he said her name slowly, as if he wanted to feel the sound of those letters. The following day promised to be very busy, much more than she imagined. Paris jumped out of bed at 5:43 in the morning. It was not the alarm clock that woke her up. She had not even managed to set the clock properly the night before, but her own body decided that rest was over. With the most important interview of her life scheduled for just a few hours away, sleep simply vanished. She spent some time staring at the ceiling in the dark, counting the cracks she already knew by heart, trying to make the butterflies in her stomach go away, but the feeling that everything was going to go wrong remained. "Calm down, Paris," she said softly. "It is just a conversation, the largest company in the country, but still, just a conversation. No need to panic." Her stomach seemed to disagree and tied itself into an even tighter knot. She got up and went to the closet, which made that annoying creak when it opened, needing a repair she never had the money to pay for. She looked at her few clothes with a huge sense of discouragement, not knowing what to choose. There were the somewhat worn-out jeans, which were too informal, the skirt she got from her grandmother, which seemed too short for the occasion, and a dress that reminded her more of a walk in the park than a serious meeting. "Why do I not have anything decent?" she complained in silence, moving the hangers. Everything she owned seemed to scream that she did not have a cent in her pocket, which happened to be true, but she did not want to arrive there looking defeated. After changing her clothes 3 times and almost giving up on everything, she chose black pants that still had a solid color and a blouse her grandmother had given her a long time ago, insisting it was a piece that commanded respect. "Less is more, Grandma always says that," she tried to convince herself, looking at the mirror that had a crack down the middle. She tried to fix her hair in a way that did not look messy, but she felt lost. It was at that moment that Mrs. Tyra appeared at the door, making no noise, bringing a warm cup of tea. "You look great, my dear," her grandmother spoke with that sweet way that always brought a little peace. "You do not need to be so hard on yourself. Your posture is worth more than any expensive clothes." Paris looked at herself again, seeing only an ordinary girl trying her luck. "Grandma, I look like someone who got lost on the way to the building, not someone who's going to work there." "For you look like Paris," Mrs. Tyra countered, handing her the cup. "And that is what they need, someone real, The same girl who did not think twice before throwing herself into the fire to save a stranger. Paris took the tea, feeling the warmth in her hands that still would not stop shaking. The taste of the honey helped to calm her nerves a bit, but the fear of failing was still there. What if I freeze up when the time comes? And what if you put on a great show? Her grandmother returned the question with a firm look. Have you stopped to think that everything might go right? Paris had not thought of that. She was too busy imagining every possible way to embarrass herself. The taxi, which took a good portion of the savings she kept for emergencies, stopped in front of Carrington Enterprises 18 minutes before 10. Paris stayed inside for a while, motionless, just observing the facade. The building was a giant of glass and metal that shone so brightly it almost hurt her eyes, appearing to look down at her from above and laugh at her face. It was a place that overflowed with power, making her feel tiny in the face of such ostentation. Are you getting out or have you decided to live in there? The driver asked, not out of malice, but with that haste of someone who has a busy day and cannot waste time. I am getting out for sure, Paris answered while paying for the ride, grabbing her old purse that had been asking for retirement for years, and jumped out of the car feeling her legs go a bit weak. She froze on the sidewalk, seeing that anthill of people constantly entering and exiting through the glass doors. They were men in expensive suits and women on top of stiletto heels, walking with the confidence of someone who never had to choose which bill to pay at the end of the month. Paris looked at her own clothes, at her worn purse, and at the clearance shoes that were already 5 years old. I am a little ant, she grumbled. A little ant about to enter a nest of giants. But then her grandmother's voice came to mind, the memory of the overdue electricity bill and the rent knocking on the door, besides that sparkle in Mrs. Tyra's eyes when she left the house. All right, she said to herself, adjusting the strap on her shoulder and lifting her head. It is just an interview. You have been through worse things, like the car catching fire or that boss who lived to scream at you in your last job. A woman flew past her and almost knocked her to the ground without even looking back. Focus, Paris, she breathed deeply. Go in, talk, and leave. There is no secret to it. She faced the revolving door, which was much more annoying to pass through than it seemed, and came face to face with the lobby. It was a crazy thing. The ceiling was so high it even made her dizzy to look at. The marble floor shone so much it looked like a mirror, and there was even a fountain with some strange statues in the middle. The noise inside was just a murmur of important people and the sound of elevators arriving. She felt like a lost child in a place where she could not touch anything. Can I help you? The receptionist asked, completely perfect, with flawless hair and a smile that was purely polite, with no warmth at all. Yes, I am Paris Hollis. I have an interview at 10 o'clock. The young woman began to type at a frantic pace without even looking at the keys. 14th floor. The elevators are right there on the right. Mrs. Vance is already expecting you. Thank you, Paris replied, feeling her mouth go dry all of a sudden. Inside the elevator, the walls were made of mirrors, and Paris saw her own nervousness multiplied by 5. She pressed the button for 14 and watched the numbers go up slowly. It is just a conversation, she said to her reflection. You pulled a man out of a fire. Talking to someone from HR cannot be that bad. The elevator continued to go up, and she thought that in fact people from HR could be much more terrifying than fire, since cars did not ask those annoying questions about where you see yourself in a few years. She gave her blouse one last adjustment and tried to put on a face of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The doors opened, and a woman who looked like she had stepped off the cover of a business magazine appeared. She wore a very well-tailored grey suit and was quite tall because of her heels. Miss Paris, her voice was professional but not quite cold. I am Carly Vance, Human Resources Manager. Follow me, please. Paris followed her down a hallway that seemed to never end, passing rooms with glass walls where everyone appeared far too busy with very important things. The interview room was breathtaking, with a giant table, leather chairs, and windows that showed the entire city down below. Paris sat down, trying to control her body so she would not look like she was about to faint at any moment. Carly opened a folder, picked up a pen, and gave a smile that revealed nothing of what she was thinking. So, Paris, she began in a very neutral tone, tell me a little about what you have done professionally. And there was the question Paris feared the most. Because, to be honest, what experience did she have? 3 months at a cafe that closed its doors because the owner gave up on the business. 2 months doing deliveries for a neighborhood shop, and that telemarketing job that lasted a week before she realized she preferred anything else in life. Paris swallowed hard, deciding that the best thing was to tell the truth since she had nothing to lose. Well, I have worked in several temporary roles, nothing that changes the world or looks impressive on paper, but I always gave my blood to everything I did, always. Carly wrote something down without changing her expression, leaving Paris in the dark, not knowing if the woman thought that was good or if she was already thinking about the next person in line. And why do you think the position should be yours? Paris froze for a second. It was time to decide whether to use those canned phrases from the internet or to lay her cards on the table. She thought of her grandmother, the bills that never stopped coming, and all the doors that had been slammed in her face over the last few months. Because, she felt her voice come out firmer, I learn anything quickly, I'm dedicated, and I really need this chance. I do not have a resume full of fancy names or expensive diplomas, but I have plenty of will to prove my worth. If someone gives me an opportunity, I will make it count. Not because I am perfect, but because I know what it is like to have to fight for every cent. And when you learn how to fight, giving up is not part of the routine. Silence took over the room. Carly stopped writing and looked up, and for the first time in that conversation, she gave a smile that seemed real, not just polite. Interesting, the woman said, and Paris was left wondering if that was the beginning of a dream or the end of the line. 20 minutes later, Paris was already in the elevator, going down with her mind racing at 100 miles per hour, unable to determine if she had done well or if she had embarrassed herself. Carly asked a bunch of other things about pressure and teamwork, and she answered everything with the greatest sincerity in the world, but was being honest enough in a place like that. The marble lobby felt even heavier on the way out, and Paris went through the revolving doors, feeling the sun hit her face with force. Well, she spoke to herself on the sidewalk, what I could do, I did. Now all there is to do is wait. And waiting was always the worst part. When she walked into the house, the smell of vegetable soup took over everything. Mrs. Tyra was at the stove, but stopped everything as soon as she heard the sound of the door. And? Her grandmother asked, her eyes shining with anxiety. How was it there? Paris dropped her purse on the sofa and threw herself into a chair, exhausted. I do not know, Grandma. Truly, I have no idea. But did you feel like it went well? I was myself. Maybe even too much. Paris ran her hand over her face. Basically, I said I do not know anything, but that I am stubborn enough to learn. I do not know if that helps, or if I ruined my chances. Mrs. Tyra set the spoon aside and went to her, placing her hands on her granddaughter's shoulders. My dear, nowadays nobody tells the truth anymore. People only want to look like what they are not, and perhaps in a place full of people pretending someone honest is exactly what they are looking for. Or, Paris countered, they will laugh and hire someone with 10 diplomas and 5 years of practice. That could be, but maybe they see what I see. A woman who does not back down when life gets tough. Paris smiled a little, feeling the weight of doubt give her a break. Where did you learn to be so smart, Grandma? 72 years of being hit by life will teach you. Mrs. Tyra winked at her. Now eat this soup before it gets cold and forget about this interview for today. What is done is done. But forgetting was impossible, and that night sleep did not come, only thoughts hammering away all the time. Meanwhile, at the top of Carrington Enterprises, in a room with a view that looked like a movie, Benjamin Carrington looked at the city through the window with his hands in his pockets, looking like the owner of everything. The door opened, and he did not even need to look to know who it was. She went through the interview, sir. His assistant Brian entered with a tablet in his hand. Carly just sent over what she thought of her. And what did she say? Benjamin continued with his back turned. Carly said the young lady has an extraordinary grit but no experience. She is a candidate very different from the standard, and she would not hire her if the orders were normal. Benjamin toyed with a pen, thinking about that night of the accident. The courage of that woman who did not think twice before getting burned to help a stranger and who still had the audacity to scold him for not wanting to go to the hospital. You just stepped out of a burning car, mister. Now is not the time to play the tough guy. He almost gave a small laugh remembering that scene. Hire her, he said at last, with a calm voice, but one that left no room for doubt. The assistant Brian was left without understanding a thing. I beg your pardon, sir? You heard correctly, you may hire her. With all due respect, Mr. Carrington, but she has none of what we ask for. She has never set foot in an office. She does not have a college degree. She does not have... Brian was listing the problems. She has will. Benjamin finally turned around, facing the employee with a very serious look. She has courage, and she has character, and that, he pointed to the pile of flawless resumes on the desk, is worth much more than any course or experience you show me on that paper. Brian even tried to say something else, but soon gave up, because he already knew his boss well enough to know that when he put something in his head, no one could take it out. Very well, sir, I will notify Carly right away. And another thing, Brian, Benjamin returned to observing the movement outside. Be discreet. I do not want her to even suspect that I had anything to do with this. You can count on it. As soon as the door closed, Benjamin let a smile escape. Paris Hollis, the woman who pulled him from the fire without asking for a cent, the only one who treated him like an ordinary person and not like the owner of an empire. She had no idea, but her life was about to turn upside down starting now, and Benjamin, for the first time in years, was curious to see where it would lead. The next 2 days felt like an eternity to Paris. She tried everything not to go crazy. She cleaned the house from top to bottom about 3 times, organized her clothes, even tried to help her grandmother with the wool, although she had no talent for it, but the interview would not leave her mind. She was in the kitchen trying to perform a miracle with the little money she had left when her phone vibrated. Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. It was a number she did not recognize. With a sweaty and trembling hand, she answered, Hello? Paris, this is Carly Vance from Carrington Enterprises. It seemed as though time stopped in those seconds. I want to congratulate you. Carly's voice sounded much lighter now. The assistant position is yours, and we expect you here on Monday to begin. Paris went silent. It seemed as if her brain had short-circuited and forgotten how to speak. Hello? Could you say that again, please? You passed, the job is yours. I really got it. Yes, the staff will send you everything by email later today. Welcome to the team, Paris. When she hung up, she remained standing there, looking at the wall in disbelief. Grandma! She shouted so loud that her voice nearly failed. Grandma, I passed, I got the job! Mrs. Tyra came from the living room as fast as her legs would allow, with a look of shock on her face. What is it, girl? Carrington, they called me. I start on Monday. And then the tears came in full force. Paris laughed and cried at the same time, and her grandmother also began to tear up, and the two of them hugged right there in the middle of the kitchen, in a tight embrace that mixed relief with the feeling that luck had finally knocked on their door. I told you, Mrs. Tyra whispered, holding her granddaughter tightly. I felt that our lives were going to change. Paris pulled away slightly, wiping her face with her hand while trying to catch her breath. Grandma, is this really real? Is it not one of those dreams where we wake up and everything has vanished? Mrs. Tyra did not think twice and gave her arm a pinch. Ouch, why did you do that? So you can see it is not a dream. For the first time in a long time, Paris felt that flutter in her stomach that was not out of fear but out of hope, a desire to believe that things were truly going to work out. Her life was changing. She just could not imagine the scale of the upheaval that lay ahead. Monday took an eternity to arrive, but when it did, everything happened very fast. Paris jumped out of bed 2 hours early, showered about 3 times out of pure nervousness, and changed her clothes until she was tired, only to end up wearing the first option again. You look wonderful, her grandmother guaranteed, placing a breakfast on the table that Paris could not even look at because she was so anxious. Now take a deep breath. It is only the beginning. Yes, only the beginning, Paris laughed nervously. At the most powerful company there is, no big deal. When she arrived in front of the Carrington building, the place looked even larger and more intimidating, but now it was different. She was not just passing through. She had a badge hanging around her neck with a photo she thought was horrible, but which said in clear letters, Paris Hollis, Administrative Assistant. That was real. At the reception, they sent her straight to the 12th floor, where a man of about 40 years old was already waiting for her. He had greying hair, a very rigid posture, and a face that looked like he did not like to waste time with nonsense. "Paris Hollis?" He extended his hand. "I am Daniel Hampton, your supervisor." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hampton," she replied, trying to shake his hand firmly so as not to appear insecure. "Welcome to the company." He handed her a pile of folders that almost made her lose her balance. "I hope you pick up the pace quickly. Here we value agility, and there is no room for mistakes. Is that clear?" Paris swallowed hard, but answered firmly. "Yes, sir, it is." "Perfect. Your desk is that one over there. I have already left everything you need to do in the first drawer. Any questions?" Paris had about 1,000 doubts, but she preferred to keep them to herself. "No, none. I am ready to start." Daniel gave a curt nod and entered his office. Paris stood there for a moment, looking at that mountain of paper and at the frantic movement of the people around her. "It will work out," she whispered, trying to calm herself. "You can do this." With her heart beating fast, she settled into her chair, opened the first folder, and began to work. A new life was beginning right there, at that very moment. A few floors above, hidden behind glass walls and far from all that noise, Benjamin Carrington watched everything from a distance, with a slight smile on his lips. He had opened the door for her, and now he wanted to see how she would manage inside. Deep down, he was rooting for Paris to show everyone, and especially herself, what she was capable of doing. The first few days at the company were a true shock, to say the least. Paris already imagined that the routine in a company of that size would be heavy, but the reality was quite different from the picture she had drawn in her head. It felt as if she were trying to run a marathon inside a pool full of mud. The amount of new things to learn was absurd. There were reports with names she could not even pronounce, and acronyms that looked like secret codes, all because the office staff loved to complicate simple things. Schedules changed all the time, meetings were scheduled and cancelled at the last minute, and no one seemed to care whether she was keeping up with the pace or not. She had to deal with annoying people on the phone while maintaining her composure, spend hours in meetings that seemed to lead nowhere, and still learn how to operate machines she had never seen in her life. Everything required a version of her that she did not even know existed. A Paris who could not tremble when the phone rang or when the printer decided to jam right at the most stressful moment. And of course stumbles happened, small disasters that left her dying of embarrassment. There was the day she mixed up the folders of important documents and watched the boss search everywhere, while she prayed to vanish from the map, or when she almost served food that a client could not eat, escaping a giant problem by a mere detail. But what drew attention was that, instead of sitting down and crying, she kept the lesson, noted everything down, and did not let the mistake repeat itself. "It is just the beginning," she said softly around 9 o'clock at night, with her eyes tired from staring at the computer screen for so long. "You have already endured much worse while earning a pittance. This here is just another challenge, only in a fancier place." The supervisor, Daniel Hampton, was a curious type. He projected that image of a tough sergeant who accepts nothing less than perfection, but deep down he seemed to observe her every move. He was overly demanding, but he was not one to commit injustices. After a week that felt like it had lasted a month, full of rushing around and people complaining even about the font size in the documents, he called Paris into his office. She entered expecting the worst, already imagining she would be fired or receive the biggest scolding of her life. "Sit down, Paris," he spoke, without giving any clues as to what was coming. She settled into the chair, her hands cold from so much nervousness. Daniel stared at her for a while, with that look of someone who is analyzing every detail, until, to her astonishment, he relaxed his face and gave a slight smile. "You pick things up on the fly," he went straight to the point. "To be honest, I thought you would take much longer to understand how things work around here." Paris was left without a reaction, finding it hard to believe she was receiving a compliment from the very man who had a reputation for making even directors shake in their boots. "Thank you, Mr. Hampton," she replied, her voice somewhat shaky. "For you still trip over some things," he continued, "because he would not be himself if he did not give a little nudge. But you learn from the mistake, and that is hard to see nowadays. Most people throw in the towel or keep hitting the same wrong key, but not you. You go in there and fix it." Paris felt a nice warmth in her chest, a mix of relief with the certainty that she was on the right path. It was the feeling that, for the first time, she was not just another person trying her luck, but someone who actually had something to offer. "You just need to believe in yourself more," Daniel added, lowering his head to the papers again, which was the clear sign that the conversation was over. "Now get back out there, because this work is not going to turn itself in." Paris left the room feeling like she was walking on clouds. She was gaining ground in that enormous place, winning one stage at a time. While she exhausted herself with daily tasks, dealing with machines that jammed and piles of documents that never ended, Benjamin kept an eye on her, but without making it obvious. He was not the type to hover over someone, acting like a bodyguard or appearing every moment to save the day, because he believed that everyone had to show what they were made of, falling and getting up alone to learn how to truly find their balance. Except that Paris had something different, and he could not quite explain what it was. Perhaps it was the memory of her pulling him from the wreckage without thinking twice, or the way she scolded him for being stubborn without sucking up to him or being afraid of his face. It was her grit, the honesty that was not easily found around there, the way she spoke to anyone, from the janitor to the director, with the same politeness. On a Thursday morning, Brian was going over the monthly results, a boring subject that Benjamin pretended to listen to while thinking about other things, when he saw someone through the glass. Outside, Paris was passing through the hallway totally focused, carrying a pile of folders that almost hid her face. She had the tip of her tongue sticking out, the way she did when she was very concentrated, and she walked slowly, as if she were carrying something that could explode at any moment. Benjamin kept watching, and a smile appeared on his face without him even noticing. "Mr. Carrington?" Brian's voice cut through the silence. "Are you following me?" "Ah, yes, of course, please continue. I was asking about the plans for Asia and how is she doing?" Benjamin cut off the subject, still looking toward the hallway where she had disappeared. Brian was left without understanding a thing. "I beg your pardon, sir?" "Paris Hollis, the young lady Daniel is training. How is she performing at work?" The assistant paused, finding that question very strange, since in all the time he had worked there it was very rare for the boss to want to know about someone who had just started in a low-level position. "She is doing well, from what they say," Brian replied carefully. "Daniel seems to have taken a liking to her, but it is still early to draw a conclusion." "I see." Benjamin just nodded and went back to looking at the papers as if it were no big deal. "You may continue with what you were saying." But Brian was no fool. He noticed the interest and already kept that in the back of his mind to find out who this Paris was who had caught the attention of the big boss. As time passed, Paris herself began to feel something strange in the air. It was nothing she could point her finger at. There was no one following her or anything like that, but it was that weird feeling of being watched. You know when the back of your neck starts to tingle and you are certain someone is looking at you? She would be there tidying things at her desk, and out of nowhere she would feel this chill. She would look around, but only saw the staff working at their usual pace. Or else in the middle of a meeting she would feel that weight on her shoulders, but when she lifted her head, everyone was looking at their own papers. It was something that left her feeling dizzy. Until, on a Tuesday afternoon with the office buzzing, it happened. Paris was in the conference room on the 15th floor, that fancy place with the glass table, and a view that still gave her vertigo, organizing the paperwork for a presentation Daniel was going to give early the next morning. She was so engrossed, muttering to herself about where she could have tucked away the last quarter projection, that she did not even notice the door opening. Paris. She nearly jumped and dropped everything she was holding. When she turned around, all clumsy, she came face to face with him, and the world seemed to stop at that very instant. That face and those grey eyes were unmistakable. It was the man from the accident. Paris's brain froze completely. He was standing there wearing an impeccable suit and positioned just a few steps away from her, as if it were the most common thing in the world, but it was not. None of it made sense. The man she had pulled from a burning car, that mysterious Benjamin, was inside Carlton Enterprises, in his company, looking at her with that same focused gaze. "You—" Paris tried to speak, but the voice would not come out. "You are—" "Benjamin Carlton," he replied calmly, and there was a different glint in his eyes, something between amusement and satisfaction, as if he had been anticipating this scene. Carlton, the last name echoed in her mind, the owner of everything, the man who ruled every inch of that building. It was him. I did not. You did not. Paris felt like she was going to have a heart attack right there. The sheets of paper slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor like a rain of paper. You did not tell me who you were. It is just that you never quite got around to asking, he said with that slight smile that she found irritating. I pulled you from a burning car and you did not think it was important to say who you really were? Her voice rose several octaves, coming out much louder than she expected, likely catching the attention of anyone passing in the hallway. Benjamin took a step toward her, and Paris realized she was shaking from head to toe, unsure if it was from shock, anger, or the mental confusion taking over. You called me Mr. that night, he commented, and one could tell he was finding the situation funny. You gave me orders to stop playing the tough guy. It was different from what I am used to. Different, Paris repeated, trying to maintain her calm while everything inside her was boiling. So you found the situation funny then? I found it authentic. He looked at the documents lying on the carpet and then faced her again. Daniel told me you are doing well. It seems you have already gotten the hang of things here at the firm. She could not understand how he could maintain that calm posture, as if he had not just turned her life upside down. She took a deep breath, trying to gather the pieces of her professional side. I'm giving my absolute best, Mr. Carlton. Mr. Carlton. The name sounded heavy and far too formal for someone who had already given him orders to get to a hospital immediately. He watched her for a moment. Those eyes that were once lost in the middle of the smoke were now very lucid and focused on her. Keep doing this good work, he said in a lower tone, and before leaving he added, And Paris, thank you for everything that night. I had not yet had the opportunity to thank you as you deserve. He walked away immediately after, leaving Paris alone in the middle of the conference room with a pile of paper on the floor and a totally new reality to process. The man she saved and the great executive who commanded that entire empire were the same person. What on earth is happening to my life? Paris whispered to the void. The walls, predictably, did not answer. That night, Paris arrived home euphoric. Grandma, you are not going to believe this. Mrs. Tyra looked up from her knitting. What happened, girl? The man from the accident. Paris dropped her bag haphazardly and threw herself into the chair. The guy I pulled from the burning car, it was him. Him who, dear? Benjamin Carlton, the owner of the company, the CEO. Paris took a deep breath. I spent weeks thinking I had saved some random guy, and the whole time it was the most powerful man in the city. Mrs. Tyra stopped what she was doing. Really? He showed up today in the conference room, called me by name, and when I looked... Paris shook her head, still trying to wrap her mind around it. It was the same grey eyes, the same face. It was really him. And what was it that he said to you? He thanked me for saving his life that night. Paris stood up, too restless to stay still. Grandma, now everything makes sense. The call out of nowhere, the interview, the job. It was not a coincidence. He was the one who hired me. Well, you saved the man's life. It makes sense that he would want to give back in some way. But I had not even sent a resume there. He looked for me, Grandma. He found me somehow and brought me into the company. Paris stopped, staring at her grandmother. How did he know my name that night? I never said it. Mrs. Tyra gave a discreet smile. Maybe he investigated. Men like him have the means for that. This is crazy. Paris sat down again. I worked so hard to get that job. I was a nervous wreck in the interview and I celebrated when they called me, and the whole time he already knew who I was. And does that change anything? Paris paused for a second. Does it? Are you doing your job properly? I think so. Daniel seems quite satisfied. Then it changes nothing. Mrs. Tyra went back to her knitting. He opened the door, but you were the one who walked in and proved that you deserved to be inside. Paris remained in silence, processing the shock and that strange feeling that her life had just been turned inside out. It is very strange, Grandma, to see him there in a suit, all powerful, and to remember him covered in soot, coughing and asking for help. People have many faces, dear. You saw one that few know. And now, what do I do? You go to work tomorrow, you do your best, and you stop worrying. Mrs. Tyra looked at her with affection. Life will show the rest in its own time. The following day, Daniel handed her the responsibility of organizing the paperwork for a very important board meeting. It was the kind of task that usually fell into the hands of people with years at the company. But for some reason, he decided to trust her. "Do not make me look bad," he said with that serious manner that left Paris somewhere between despair and the urge to prove herself. "I will not," she guaranteed. And so Paris stayed late, truly late, so much so that the cleaning crew was already vacuuming and looking at her without understanding what that girl was still doing there. There were piles of documents, tables that never ended, and charts that needed to be aligned down to the last millimeter, because the directors were the type who complained about any detail out of place. When she finally declared the work finished, after checking everything about 4 times just out of pure fear of making a mistake, she was a wreck. Her eyes burned, her back was stiff, and she felt like she never wanted to see another spreadsheet in her life. The building was already in utter silence when she left the room, with the hallway lights almost all turned off, leaving only that faint emergency glow that made everything look like a suspense movie. Paris walked toward the elevator, hearing the sound of her own footsteps in that void, when she felt her heart nearly stop from fright. Someone was standing in the hallway, a tall shadow near the windows, illuminated only by the light coming from the street. "My God!" Paris let her breath out all at once, bringing her hand to her chest as she felt her heart beating in her throat. The shadow moved and turned around, revealing Benjamin Carrington. It had to be him. Who else would be walking through empty rooms at 10 at night like a ghost? "Sorry," he spoke, and Paris had the impression that he was finding amusement in her fright. "It was not my intention to scare you." "Well, it did not work out very well," she replied without thinking, before realizing she was speaking to the owner of the company. "I mean, it is fine, Mr. Carrington. I just did not think anyone else would be around here." He walked toward her, stepping out of the dark. The suit was still there, but the tie was loose, and the first buttons of his shirt were open, giving him an air of exhaustion that made him more human. "Working this late, Paris?" "Yes, sir. Daniel asked for the papers for tomorrow morning's meeting." She pointed with her head toward the room where she had been. "I just finished everything." Benjamin nodded in approval, with his hands in his pockets, staring at her in that way that always left her flustered. "You have been dedicating yourself quite a bit. That is something hard to find." Paris felt her face heat up instantly, not understanding why his compliment weighed so much. "Thank you, I'm just trying to do my part, you know." "You are doing much more than that." He paused for a moment, and Paris felt he was going to say something different, something that moved away from work, but he seemed to pull back. "Good work, Paris." His voice became lower, almost a caress. "Go rest. You need it." He gave a quick nod and followed the dark hallway, leaving the sound of his footsteps fading away. Paris remained there, alone, with a head full of doubts and no explanations. "What is he doing here until this hour?" she grumbled while pressing the elevator button. "Does he not have a huge house or some fancy dinner to go to?" Deep down, that annoying little voice of intuition said that Benjamin was there for the same reason she was. There was something going on between the two of them, something that neither of them wanted to admit. The weeks went by at a crazy pace between meetings and reports, and Paris began to feel that she truly belonged in that place. Daniel remained demanding, but he did not hold back on the compliments when she got things right. "You have a knack for this, Paris," he said one day. "You have more capability than you think." Even Carly, who was always more reserved, commented when they crossed paths in the hallway that the company needed people with her energy. Paris thanked her, trying to maintain her composure, but inside she was radiant. It was good to feel valued, to feel that she was not a fraud who would be discovered at any moment, except that along with the success came an anguish she did not know how to explain. Benjamin would not leave her mind, and it was not because he was always nearby, although he seemed to appear more than normal. It was because he had become a question without an answer. Why did he look at her so much? Why did his eyes linger on hers for so long, for a duration that no longer seemed professional? She tried to focus on the work, but ignoring his presence was becoming impossible. And the worst doubt of all was why a part of her, a stubborn part that could not be silenced, simply did not want to ignore any of it. On a Wednesday afternoon, Paris was reviewing some papers in the conference room when Benjamin entered without warning again. She was already suspicious that the man had some kind of sensor to know the exact moment she was alone in some corner. "Everything all right in here?" he asked with that low voice that seemed to make the glass in the room vibrate slightly. "Yes, Mr. Carrington," Paris replied, without taking her eyes off the sheets, trying to maintain her professional stance and hide that her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. "I am finishing the reviews that Daniel requested." She heard the sound of his footsteps coming closer, feeling that presence that was anything but casual. When she finally worked up the courage to look, Benjamin was there beside the table, staring at her work with that look she could not decipher, a way that left her irritated and fascinated at the same time. "You are very dedicated," he commented, and it was not a throwaway compliment, it was a certainty. People like that are a rarity these days. Paris gave a sheepish smile and looked the other way. "I am just doing what is required of me." "And what is required of you is impressive." The sentence hung floating in the air, full of a weight that Paris could not, or perhaps was afraid to, understand. Benjamin remained there for a few moments, close enough for her to smell his cologne, that scent of wealthy people, and then, as he always did, he kept to himself whatever was passing through his mind. "Keep up this pace, Paris. Your effort is not going unnoticed." He left once again, leaving her there with a racing heart and her mind spinning. That night, while eating with Mrs. Tyra, Paris could not hold back and let it all out. "He speaks to me as if he already knows me, Grandma, as if he is waiting for me to do something and I do not have the slightest idea what it is." Mrs. Tyra continued eating with that calm that was almost irritating. "Perhaps he sees something in you that you yourself have not noticed yet." "Like what? My knack for nearly setting the printer on fire. Maybe he sees the woman who pulled a stranger from a burning car without thinking about the danger. The one who does not hang her head when the world says no, and who treats everyone the same. From the owner of the company to the cleaning boy." Paris made a face, but she felt those words made sense deep down. "People enter our lives as mirrors," Mrs. Tyra spoke softly. "They show who we can truly be. Grandma, I do not even know what I am going to make for lunch tomorrow. I cannot be a mirror for anything." "Oh, my dear," the old woman laughed. "You already are. You just lack the heart to face what you see." Paris stayed quiet, picking at her plate. In the little corner of her soul where she hid the truths that hurt, she knew her grandmother was not wrong. There was something big coming, something that was incredibly scary, and for the first time, she did not know if she was ready for whatever might happen. One thing was certain: the distance between her and Benjamin Carrington was getting shorter and shorter, and very soon, one of the two would have to take the first step to cross that line.
If you're enjoying our story,
Don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us.
and subscribe to the channel so you can keep following along.
We're always here sharing new stories with you.
Thank you for being here with us.
The days following everything that happened were like that good kind of tiredness felt by someone finishing a massive task, a mixture of exhaustion and that lingering doubt of, wow, did I actually pull that off? Paris could not stop hearing good things, and they were not those empty hallway compliments where the person does not even look you in the face while speaking. They were words that carried weight. She found herself pinching her arm to check if she was not living in a delusion. Even Daniel Hampton, the man she had seen make directors tremble with a single glare, stopped by her desk one of those mornings. "Your performance was excellent, Paris. Keep up this pace, and your place here is more than guaranteed," he said, dry and direct. She nearly spilled coffee on her keyboard from the shock. "Thank you, Mr. Hampton," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady so as not to sound like a child who had just been given a piece of candy. He simply nodded and continued on his way, as he was not a man for small talk, and Paris remained there smiling at her monitor. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to the computer screen. "He said my future is guaranteed." Gradually, the air in the office began to change. That feeling of being a poor intruder at a wealthy person's ball was fading, giving way to a confidence she did not yet know. Colleagues who used to walk straight past now stopped to comment on the bad coffee, the stalled traffic, or how the air conditioning seemed to want to freeze everyone. They were silly conversations, but to her, they were proof that she was finally starting to belong to that place. Except life never makes things easy, and there was a stone in her path she could not kick away, Benjamin. The man was becoming increasingly present, more direct, and it messed with her senses in a way she had no idea how to control. Meanwhile, up at the top, Benjamin himself was facing a problem that did not appear in management manuals. He knew how to handle markets, profits, and global crises, but Paris Hollis was a calculation that did not add up in his head. Sitting in that enormous room on Friday afternoon, he tried to focus on the reports, but his thoughts drifted away. He remembered the way she bit her lip when she was concentrated, the spark in her eyes when she conquered a challenge, and the way she treated everyone the same without sucking up to anyone. In his world, everyone always wanted some advantage, but Paris was different. She pulled him from the fire without knowing his bank account balance, called him Mr., and told him to stop being fussy. She wanted nothing, and that was so new it was becoming addictive. Benjamin stood up and went to the large window that showed the entire city below. He knew Paris must be somewhere in that building working hard, because the girl had a grit he rarely saw. She was like that plant that grows in the middle of the asphalt, you know, stubborn and impossible not to notice. "Is everything all right in here, sir?" Brian's voice came from the door, snapping him out of the trance. "Yes, Brian," he replied, putting on his serious boss mask again. "I was just thinking about life." "Thinking about life?" the assistant asked suspiciously. "With all due respect, you have been a bit out of orbit. You made me repeat the same thing 3 times yesterday during the meeting." Benjamin furrowed his brow, knowing the employee was right and that such a thing could not happen. "It is just some complicated decisions on my mind," he lied, trying to end the subject. "It is nothing you need to worry about." Brian did not buy the excuse, but he was too smart to poke the bear. "If you say so anyway, I brought the papers you requested." "And Paris, how is she doing?" The question escaped before Benjamin could bite his tongue. Brian froze for a second. "I beg your pardon, sir." "Paris Hollis, the young woman who assists Daniel, how has her performance been?" The assistant looked at Benjamin with that expression of someone who had finally put the puzzle pieces together, which was quite irritating. "She is doing very well, sir. Daniel is flawed, and the people in the department like her. Even the clients have been praising the way she resolves things." Brian paused for a second, but why the interest? "I'm just keeping an eye on new talent," Benjamin tossed out with indifference, pretending the matter was of no importance as he returned to his reading. Brian left the room, but Benjamin knew he had shown his hand, though deep down he could not even feel guilty about it. Paris was losing her patience with a tedious document when the extension on her desk rang. "Paris Hollis. Good afternoon." "Paris, it is Daniel. Step into my office for a moment, please." The way he spoke revealed nothing, but she felt that chill run through her body, because a conversation in the boss's office is either a promotion or a goodbye, with no middle ground. She saved what she was doing and walked down the hallway, trying not to show she was terrified. When she opened the door, she came face to face with Brian, the big boss's right-hand man, sitting inside. That was definitely out of the ordinary. "Sit down, Paris," Daniel pointed to the chair. She obeyed, feeling her hands go damp. "Stay calm," the supervisor said, noticing she was pale. "You are not in trouble, quite the opposite." Brian gave a genuine smile, without that office mask. "Mr. Carrington is hosting a lunch with the management staff tomorrow, and he made a point of having you on the guest list." Paris was speechless for a moment. "Excuse me? What do you mean?" "A business lunch," Daniel explained. "There will be high-level people, directors, company partners, and you will be there too. But for what reason?" She looked at the two of them, totally lost. "I just got here. I am only an assistant. What am I going to do at a director's lunch?" Daniel shrugged. "The boss's reasons I do not know. I only know your name was there." Brian, on the other hand, had that glint in his eyes of someone who knew exactly what was going on, but was not going to spill the beans. "Take it as a reward for your effort. The work you did at that event caught a lot of people's attention, including the CEO himself." "Congratulations, Paris," Brian added, maintaining that air of mystery. "This is not something you see every day. In fact, I do not remember him ever inviting someone from administration to these meetings before." Paris felt as if the floor had vanished. "Okay, and where will it be?" "Tomorrow at noon at Giardino." That was the Italian restaurant Paris only knew from passing by and looking at the menu through the glass, knowing she would never have the money to sit there. Right, she murmured, almost voiceless, tomorrow at Giardino with the company bigwigs. Totally normal. As soon as she left there, she rushed to the phone and called home. Grandma, for the love of God, I need help. The next day, Paris nearly lost her mind trying to choose an outfit. With a closet empty of options, she ended up picking a dress her grandmother had forced her to buy a while ago, saying that one day it would be useful. "Did I not tell you that you would wear it?" Mrs. Tyra said with great pride while adjusting the dress on her granddaughter. "A mother is always right. You are my grandmother, not my mother. A grandmother is a mother twice over, so I am twice as right." Paris stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. The dress was not flashy, and did not try to be something it was not. It had a simple cut, but it fit well, without giving off the idea that she was trying too hard to be someone she was not. "You look great," Mrs. Tyra guaranteed with a nod. "Now stop shaking, it is just a lunch." "A lunch with the owner of the company and all the high-level staff," Paris countered, feeling a slight panic, a small thing, only my entire future at stake. "Paris," her grandmother held her face with both hands. "Forcing her granddaughter to focus, you pulled a man out of a fire, handled an event that no one believed in, and won over the crankiest supervisor in that place. You can do this easily." Paris let her breath out slowly, trying to calm herself. "Okay, I can do this. And another thing," Mrs. Tyra said with a small smirk, "maybe he just wants to get to know the person who surprised him a little better." "Grandma, it is work, not a date." Paris cut her off immediately, but the look on the older woman's face showed she had her own doubts. The Giardino was even more luxurious than Paris had imagined, with massive chandeliers, impeccable tables, and a silence that only exists in places where people have a lot of money. She felt like a fish out of water the very instant she stepped inside. The management staff was already gathered, talking about investments and technical terms that she could barely follow, so she tried to tuck herself away in some corner, hoping no one would notice her presence. But there was no way around it. Paris. That deep voice reached her ears and made everything tremble. She looked up and came face to face with Benjamin, elegant as always in a dark suit. "Mr. Carrington," she replied, feeling her voice come out a bit strange. "Come sit here." He pointed to the chair right next to his, in a tone that did not leave much room for discussion. Paris went over there feeling somewhat aimless, sensing the weight of everyone's gaze upon her. Why was the new assistant sitting right next to the big boss? That was the question that must have been crossing the mind of every director present. "Are you enjoying the work so far?" Benjamin asked while the waiters brought the plates, serving something with a difficult name that she did not even recognize. "I am, Mr. Carrington." She picked up her utensil carefully, trying not to make a fool of herself. "It is a lot of rushing around, but I am getting the hang of it. That is exactly what I expect from you." The way he spoke, in a tone that seemed more protective than demanding, made Paris look directly at him. It was a mistake, because when their eyes met, she felt a shock run through her body, a powerful sensation that she could not pretend did not exist. He looked away first, reaching for his wine glass, but she noticed that he also seemed a bit shaken. The lunch continued, and to the surprise of Paris, Benjamin did not want to talk about goals or profits. He wanted to know about her. He asked what she wanted out of life, what made her get out of bed every day, and what she would do if she could choose any path. Paris opened up, talking about her desire to take good care of her grandmother, the fears she felt, and the stubbornness to keep trying even when everything seemed to go wrong. Benjamin listened to every detail, paying attention in a way that no one ever had before. When it was all over and they walked to the restaurant door, he stopped beside her. "You did very well today," he commented with a softer voice. "Thank you, Mr. Carrington, but I have to ask." She summoned her courage and looked him straight in the eyes. "Why me? Why invite me to a place like this and give me all this attention?" Benjamin stopped, turning his body to face her directly. And even with the movement on the sidewalk and people rushing past, it felt like the two of them were inside a bubble where the sound of the rest of the world could not enter. "It is because you are not like the others, Paris," he said each word calmly, giving weight to what he spoke in a place where everyone does everything to impress. "You just are yourself. You do not try to fake anything or join in these games of interest. I value that more than you can imagine." Paris froze, her mind went blank, and she could not put together a sentence that made sense. Benjamin gave that smirk that always disarmed her and said goodbye with a quick wave. "I will see you at the office on Monday." He got into a black car that pulled up right then as if it were rehearsed, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, trying to understand what had just happened. That night, the dinner her grandmother made remained almost untouched on her plate, while the head of Paris did not stop spinning. "Are you going to tell me everything, or am I going to have to pull the information out of you?" Mrs. Tyra asked, losing her patience. Paris set her utensil aside. "He said that I am different, Grandma, that I do not fake things, and that he likes that about me. And why do you have that look on your face? Is that a bad thing by any chance?" "It is bad because he is my boss, Grandma." "None of this is normal. Bosses do not take assistants to eat with directors or want to know about the dreams and personal lives of anyone." Mrs. Tyra sipped some of her tea without losing her calm. "Perhaps he is not acting only as your boss. And what is he acting as then? As a man who has his eye on a woman?" Paris nearly choked on her own shock. "Grandma, stop that. Of course not. That is impossible. And why would it be? Because he is Benjamin Carrington. The man is a billionaire. He must have a lot of models chasing after him. Why would he want to know about me?" The grandmother gave that smile of someone who has seen everything in this life. "Sometimes people cross our path for reasons that we take time to understand, but eventually everything fits together. That does not solve my problem, Grandma. It is not meant to be solved. It is for you to start seeing reality." Paris let out a heavy sigh, sinking into her chair. "I do not know what I do with this situation. With him. With all of this that is happening." "Then do nothing for now," Mrs. Tyra held her granddaughter's hand with affection. "Just listen to what your heart says. It usually knows things long before our heads do." But that was exactly what left Paris terrified, because when she stopped to listen to what she felt, pushing all the fear and insecurity aside, there was only one answer. Benjamin Carrington had ceased to be just the owner of the company where she worked. He was becoming something much more complicated, dangerous, and difficult to remove from her thoughts. And the worst part of all was feeling that a part of her, however small, did not want to forget him at all. She wanted to see where this whole story was going to go, even feeling that the path had everything to end in trouble. But the truth was that Paris Amelia Hollis was never one to choose the easiest exit or the most guaranteed path, and something deep down warned that this time it would be no different.
And if you like listening to these stories wherever you are,
Follow us on Spotify.
and don't forget to rate us with 5 stars.
That really makes a difference for us to keep creating.
And helps these stories reach even more people. Thank you for supporting our work.
Paris's life was spinning so fast that she could barely keep up. It was like being on a carousel that someone had accelerated way too much. It was thrilling, but it also brought that nausea of someone who is completely out of control. At Carrington Enterprises, she had finally earned her place, and colleagues now greeted her in the hallways, while Daniel trusted her with the most important missions. Even Carly remarked that Paris Hollis was becoming a fundamental piece of the team, which coming from her was worth as much as a gold trophy. Paris should have been radiant, celebrating and calling her grandmother every day to shout that she had finally made it. But instead, she felt a constant tightening in her chest. It was a restlessness that followed her like a shadow, difficult to lose. And this anguish had a name: Benjamin Carrington. Benjamin. The man seemed to be everywhere. Not that he followed her physically, after all he was the chief executive officer and had better things to do, but his presence filled the room. It was the way he observed her in meetings, with those eyes that lingered on her a second longer than normal, or the casual questions about how she was feeling, spoken with a tone that carried a hidden weight. There were also the encounters that seemed too casual in the corridors, where he always stopped to praise some detail of her work that no one else would notice. Paris did not know if she was losing her mind or if something real was happening, and the worst part was that she did not know which of the options was more frightening. The situation finally boiled over during a meeting on a Tuesday morning. Paris was not even supposed to be there, since her role was only to organize the papers and slip away quietly. But Daniel asked her to stay in case someone questioned the numbers. She suspected that was his way of saying you did the hard work, so enjoy the credit. The room was full of executives, discussing strategies with the confidence of those who have never faced a struggle in their lives. Paris was there in the corner, trying to disappear into her chair when Benjamin entered. The atmosphere changed instantly, and everyone straightened their backs like students before a principal. "Good morning," he greeted, going straight to the head of the table with a posture that made it clear who was in charge there. "Let us get straight to the point, Daniel. You may begin." Daniel started talking about the quarterly growth and market projections, things that Paris helped put together, but only understood superficially. Everything was within expectations until Benjamin interrupted. "These numbers catch one's attention," he said while analyzing the reports projected on the screen. "Who handled this analysis?" "My team," Daniel explained, "mainly Paris, who organized almost all the research." Benjamin then turned his face directly toward her. "She has been doing an excellent job," he stated, with a calm voice that made everyone in the room stare at Paris. For someone who arrived a short time ago, the evolution is clear. Paris's face burned, and she felt the weight of every gaze in there, people wondering who that assistant was who had caught the boss's attention. "Thank you, Mr. Carrington," she replied, feeling her voice come out somewhat shaky. When the meeting ended, she tried to run out, but Benjamin stopped her near the door. "Paris, can we talk for a minute?" She froze with her heart beating in her throat. "Yes, Mr. Carrington." He waited for the hallway to clear so they could be alone. "Great work on the reports. It seems you have caught on to things." "Thank you. I'm just trying to do my part." She tried to maintain a professional posture, ignoring the fact that he was too close, the scent of his cologne and how his eyes seemed even more intense up close. Benjamin gave a smile, but not one of those commercial ones. It was something real that changed his expression. "What you do is extraordinary." He left immediately after, leaving Paris right there in her tracks trying to catch her breath. In the following days, the atmosphere only grew heavier. It was not the workload, it was something that came from the silent expectations and the electricity that arose every time he appeared. She tried to dive into her tasks, hiding behind texts and meetings to avoid facing what she was starting to feel for her boss, but it was no use. When she arrived home at night, her mind returned to him. She thought about the way he said her name, as if every letter mattered, or the way he actually listened to what she said without just waiting for his turn to speak. "What does he want from me?" she asked the ceiling of the bedroom in the dark without being able to close her eyes. "And why am I also wanting something?" No answer came, only the silence of the room and the sound of cars passing far away on the street. One afternoon, after an exhausting day of meetings and small fires to put out, Paris arrived home earlier than usual. Mrs. Tyra was in the kitchen preparing soup, which was her remedy for any problem in the world, and she looked up as soon as her granddaughter entered. "You have a strange look on your face," the grandmother said bluntly, with that gaze that seemed to read Paris's most hidden thoughts. "It is exhaustion, Grandma." "Lie, it is confusion." Paris dropped her bag on the sofa with a sigh of someone surrendering. "Fine, I admit it, I am confused. Satisfied now? Sit here and tell me everything." Mrs. Tyra pointed to the chair, already serving tea without even asking if she wanted any. Paris settled in and held the hot cup tightly as if she needed a foundation. "It is Benjamin." "Ah," the grandmother gave a smile of someone who already knew everything, the owner of the company. "He is acting in a different way, Grandma, closer. He asks about my life, what I plan, about me. And it is not boss talk, you know. It is something more intimate, personal. I simply do not know how to react to it." Mrs. Tyra took a sip of the tea, thinking well before speaking. "And what do you feel about it?" "I feel fear. I should not feel anything other than gratitude for him noticing my effort. But there is more to it, and She covered her face with her hands. "Grandma, I think I'm starting to like him. This is a disaster. Why would it be a disaster? Because he runs everything. Because he is Benjamin Carrington and I am just me. This has every reason to end badly." The grandmother reached out and touched Paris's hand. "Listen, sometimes people appear out of nowhere in our lives. It is scary, but you have to be true to what you feel. If he is interested in you as a woman, it is because he saw something rare in there. You need to decide, Paris. Do you want to see where this goes, or do you prefer to stop now? But choose by what you want, not out of fear of what others will say." Paris nodded her head positively, but inside it was a whirlwind. Deciding seemed simple in theory, but when any path seemed like a huge risk, one ends up freezing. Meanwhile, In another part of the city, Benjamin was also in conflict. "It is Paris," he let out suddenly, cutting off Brian, who was explaining something about new markets. Brian stopped instantly. "What did you say?" "The reason my head is elsewhere." "It is her." Silence took over the room. Benjamin was not one to talk about his personal life, much less to admit that an employee was getting to him. "Paris Hollis?" Brian asked slowly, trying to understand the situation. "Daniel's assistant." "The very one. And you are into her?" "Apparently, yes." Benjamin let out a frustrated sigh. "It was not supposed to be like this. I was just going to give her an opportunity, observe from afar if she adapted, but then she... She what? She is authentic, Brian. She does not try to please me all the time, she does not play games, and she wants nothing more than a real opportunity. It is addictive." Brian leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "You are in love, man." "I did not use that word. But the look on your face used it for you." Benjamin gave him a stern look, but he was not truly angry. "What do I do now?" "Well," Brian remarked, "you can continue suffering alone and driving me crazy here, or you can simply talk to her." "And say what?" "Hello, I am your boss and I want to go out with you. I hope you do not find it strange. Perhaps in a smoother way, but deep down, that is it." Benjamin remained quiet for a while and then picked up his phone. "What are you going to do?" Brian wanted to know. "Probably something foolish." He wrote to Paris. "Can we talk tomorrow? There is a cafe near the company. At 8 o'clock? Benjamin. His finger hovered over the send button for a few seconds, hesitating, before finally confirming the message. It was done, and there was no way to go back. When Paris's phone chimed, she was in the middle of her bedtime routine, brushing her teeth, and she almost choked from the shock. Benjamin was asking for a meeting at a cafe. That was not about work, it could not be, and her heart raced in that mix of fear and butterflies in her stomach that she already knew well. With her fingers still somewhat trembling, she replied, "Of course. I will be there," and threw the device onto the bed as if it were burning. She stood there, staring at the bathroom mirror. "What are you doing?" she questioned her own reflection, trying to understand why she had accepted it so quickly. Deep down, the answer was clear. She was about to cross a dangerous boundary that could ruin everything. But the desire to go was greater than the apprehension. The next morning arrived in the blink of an eye. Paris changed her blouse several times, fixed her hair in every possible way, and almost gave up on leaving the house twice before finding her courage. The place he chose was not one of those noisy spots where executives talk business, but a quiet corner with wooden tables and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. When she entered, he was already there in a corner wearing jeans. It was the first time she saw the man without an impeccable suit, and that simpler shirt made him seem more real, more approachable, and much more attractive. He stood up as soon as he saw her, opening a smile that made her stomach do somersaults. "Hi, Paris." There was no Miss Hollis or office tone of voice. It was just her name, spoken in a way that sounded almost like a secret. "Hi," she returned, sitting in the opposite chair while trying to control her breathing. They measured each other for a moment in a silence that was not bad, but was charged with heavy expectation. "Thank you for coming," Benjamin broke the ice. "I know I gave you very short notice." "It is fine, I was curious to know what you wanted to discuss here." He gave a slight smile. "Straight to the point." "I like that about you." The waiter arrived and interrupted the mood. They ordered 2 coffees and were alone at the table again. Benjamin took a deep breath, looking like someone who was gathering the courage to jump from a high place. "Paris, I need to be very honest with you. There is something I have been trying to hide for a long time, but it is no longer working." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "You can tell me." I realized it has become impossible to keep things strictly professional. He held her gaze firmly. "And I do not quite know how to act, because what I feel for you goes far beyond liking your performance at the company." Time seemed to stop, and Paris could hear her own pulse thumping loudly in her ears. "You mean that?" she began, but her voice caught halfway. "I mean that you do not leave my head, that I make up excuses just to pass by your desk. It has been a long time since anyone made me rethink my plans or what I truly want." He took a quick pause. "It scares me, because I never mix things. I do not let feelings interfere with my routine." Paris remained static, trying to digest those words. The great chief executive officer, the man who led tense meetings without showing anything, was there in front of her, opening up and showing vulnerability. I do not even know what to say to you, Benjamin." It was the first time she removed the title from the sentence, and the atmosphere between the two changed completely in that same instant. "You do not need to say anything now," he said calmly. "I just felt that you needed to know. I wanted you to understand why I act this way when I am near you, why I pay so much attention, and why I care." "But you run the company," Paris replied, her voice nearly fading to a whisper. "This is not right. It is not what is expected in a working relationship." "I am aware of that," Benjamin agreed. "Believe me, I know well. If you decide that I should distance myself and maintain strictly professional treatment, I will respect your will, but I needed to be honest, because keeping this in was destroying me." Paris looked at the man in front of her and saw truly what was happening. She noticed the truth in his gaze, the tense body, and the way he held the coffee cup, as if he were trying to hold on to something. It was then that she realized something terrifying. The feeling was mutual. "I need some time," she said at last, feeling her voice falter a little. "I need to clear my head and think about everything you said." "That is fine." He gave a smile that seemed resigned and understanding at the same time. "I am not pressuring you for an answer now. I just did not want to hide the truth anymore." They finished drinking their coffee in a silence that now seemed lighter. At the time of saying goodbye outside, Benjamin held her hand for a moment. "No matter what you decide," he spoke softly, "nothing will change the respect I have for you, whether as a professional or as a woman." He walked away and left Paris there, standing on the sidewalk with her thoughts at 100 miles per hour and a messy heart. She had gone there expecting to resolve the situation and put an end to the doubt, but she ended up leaving with more questions than before. However, besides the confusion, there was something new that scared her even more: hope. It was the inkling that perhaps all of this was not the disaster she imagined, but rather something completely new. Something that perhaps was worth the risk, and now she just needed the courage to find out what would come next. So after the coffee, Paris felt as though she had just emerged from a hurricane. Not physically, since she was dry and without a single scratch, but inside it felt as if she had been tossed into a blender at maximum speed and poured back into the world with the obligation to function normally. Benjamin's words echoed in her mind like a scratched record, except instead of being annoying, it was disturbing, exciting, and terrifying, all at the same time. "What I feel goes far beyond admiring your service," he had said. Paris was stretched out on the bed that night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling and trying to make her brain cooperate and stop thinking for a moment, but it was no use. "All right, let us be rational about this." She spoke alone to the empty room, already accepting that talking to the walls was her new level of despair prose. "He is intelligent, successful, and far too handsome, besides apparently liking me. Cons. He is my boss, and that last item is so heavy that it almost crushes everything else." She turned on her side, squeezing the pillow against her chest. "But Grandma told me to follow what I feel, and my heart is screaming. It is a loud and even somewhat embarrassing noise." The pillow, as expected, did not give any useful advice. "You are useless," she grumbled, before giving up for good on trying to sleep. In the days that followed, Paris tried to do something that was never her strong suit, pretending that nothing had changed. Obviously, it did not work. She dove into her work with an almost sickly energy, organizing every document with exaggerated perfection and memorizing every detail of the reports so as not to be caught by surprise in any meeting. Daniel ended up noticing the strange behavior. "Paris, is everything all right? You seem a bit accelerated." "I am great. I have never been better." Why the question? Do I have a strange look on my face? She fired the words off too fast, making it clear she was at her breaking point. Daniel stared at her as if he were ready to suggest some time off. "Just do not break down, okay? Stress ruins us." But it was not the excess work that was ruining her. It was Benjamin. As much as she tried to keep the professional wall standing, he seemed to be present in every crack. It was not something invasive. He did not hang around her desk. But a single look or a discreet smile in the hallway was enough for that electricity to take over the room again. On a common Tuesday afternoon, while she was fighting with the printer that decided to jam, her phone vibrated in her pocket, and it was a message from him. "Can I ask you a favor? I want to show you something. Coffee tomorrow to discuss the next steps." Paris stared at the screen for a length of time that bordered on the ridiculous. Next steps of what? Of the company or of the two of them? Her hands began to sweat just imagining the answer. Of course, what time she sent before her courage could flee. The reply came instantly. At 9 in the same place. "And Paris, you can come without that exemplary employee shield. I just want you to be yourself." She locked her phone, feeling her heart give that silly jump that she could no longer control. "Oh my God," she whispered to herself, "I am lost, completely without a way out." The printer chose that exact moment to let out a snap that seemed to confirm the diagnosis. The following morning, Paris jumped out of bed at 5 in the morning, even though she had not slept properly. She spent the night having crazy dreams about that coffee. In one version, she spilled the hot drink on Benjamin's lap and had to flee the country to avoid being arrested. In another, she confessed her feelings, and he laughed in her face. There was even a bizarre dream where the two were on a boat with a penguin for reasons that her exhaustion refused to explain. "Brain, you are fired," Paris complained to the mirror, while trying to hide the dark circles that seemed to have made a permanent home on her face. Choosing what to wear was a drama of its own. If it were too formal, it would look like a job interview. Too casual would give the idea of sloppiness, and overdressed would give away that she was desperate to impress. "Why does this have to be so difficult?" she grumbled, tossing another discarded blouse on top of the mess on the bed. "It is just coffee with a man who, by chance, runs the company and said he likes me. The most normal thing in the world." In the end, she wore a simple design. The same one she used at that firm lunch because at least she knew it fit well. It was either that or go in pajamas, since her energy for making decisions had run out. Mrs. Tyra was already in the kitchen when she went down, and her grandmother's look was so accurate that Paris almost turned around. "Big day today?" the lady asked, serving the teapot with a feigned innocence. "It is just a coffee, Grandma." "I see. Stop with that tone. You pretend you do not, but you know everything." Mrs. Tyra gave a slight smile. "I do not know anything. I only see that my granddaughter put on her prettiest dress for a simple meeting and has that look of someone who is going to change the course of her life." Paris almost choked on her coffee. "I am not going to change any course. I am going to talk and then clock in at work, that is all." "If you say so, dear." Paris left the house well before the scheduled time, and even so she was almost late because she stood planted on the sidewalk of the coffee shop, gathering courage. "You can do this, Paris," she repeated to herself. "It is just Benjamin, the same guy you helped and who confessed what he feels. Go inside already and get it over with." She finally entered. There he was at the same table, but this time with dark jeans and a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Paris thought that should be illegal. How could someone look so good without even trying? He stood up to receive her, and the smile he gave made her legs feel weak. "You came. Did you think I was going to run away? I thought perhaps you might have panicked and taken a flight far away." Paris let out a nervous laugh. "I will not lie. The idea crossed my mind." "I am glad it did not," he said, indicating the chair. "Sit here, please." The two ordered their coffees under the curious gaze of the waitress, who clearly felt the heavy atmosphere in the air, and they sat staring at each other in silence for a while. Benjamin was the one who took the initiative. "Thank you for agreeing. I know I made things complicated between us." "Complicated is an understatement," Paris countered. "I would say everything is an immense mess, but let us go with complicated." He smiled in a light way. "I like that you do not beat around the bush." "Benjamin," she breathed deeply, trying to stay focused. "Why are we here? Truly?" He remained in silence, tapping his fingers lightly on the table, and then looked deep into her eyes with a seriousness that hurt. "Because I cannot get you out of my head. Because every time I try to convince myself that it is just admiration because you saved me in that accident, and because of your work, I feel like I am lying to myself." "And what does that mean?" "It means that you make me want things that I had already given up on having," he confessed softly. "Companionship, a real connection. Someone who sees me as a man and not as a job title or a bank balance. Someone who calls me young man and fights with me even when I am trying to act tough. Paris was speechless for a moment. You still remember that? Paris, I have not forgotten anything. I remember every word and every look of yours. From the way you did not think twice before smashing that glass, and how you protected me when everything exploded, even without knowing who I was. He stretched his hand over the table, stopping very close to hers. You are the truest person I have ever seen, and that scares me as much as it charms me. Paris stood staring at his hand there, so close that it caused vertigo. I'm not all this perfection, she said softly. I'm stubborn, I have a difficult temper, I talk to myself, and I live fighting with the office printer. You are perfect. Benjamin. To me, he took care to correct. You are exactly what I need. And it was in that moment, with that simple phrase that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul, that the defenses of Paris finally crumbled for good. She finally touched his hand. The contact was like an electric shock, their fingers fitting together perfectly, and a chemistry so powerful that she finally understood what the romantic songs meant. I'm scared to death, she confessed, afraid of this being too heavy or of you getting tired, and seeing that I am just Paris Hollis, the girl who months ago did not even have the money for bus fare. And I am just Benjamin, the fellow who nearly died in a fire because he was driving without paying attention, exhausted by everything. He squeezed her fingers with affection. I do not want a magazine version, Paris. I want the real woman, the one who complains about the machines and has this strong temper. I want you. It will be one problem after another, she warned, feeling that her heart no longer beat at a normal pace, at work, with the other employees, with the whole world. I am aware. They will talk behind our backs. They will say that I am with you out of self-interest or that you are taking advantage of your position. Paris, Benjamin lifted her hand and gave a soft kiss to her fingers. I do not give a damn about what others think. I only want to know what you want. Tell me, what do you want? It was the moment of truth, the final choice. Paris could choose the safe path, keep her badge impeccable and her heart locked away, or she could leap into the dark. I want you, she let out, the words coming out without a filter. I want to try even if it is madness or if everything seems difficult. I agree to give you a chance. The smile that appeared on the face of Benjamin was of a contagious joy. Seriously? Yes, but with conditions. Conditions? Fine, you may speak. Paris thought quickly to put some order into the mess. First, inside the company, we are only boss and employee. No privileges or different treatment. Deal. Second, no rushing. We are not going to go around acting as if we were getting married tomorrow. I want to get to know the man behind the office. Agreed. And the third? Third, she smiled, absolute sincerity. If something is bothering us, we sit down and talk. No games or masks. May I suggest a fourth? You may. Fourth rule, you will agree to have dinner with me for real, on a real date, without it being to talk about projects. Paris felt her cheeks burn. Does that not fall under the privilege rule? Not if I pay the bill and you choose the simplest place in town just to tease me. She gave a delightful laugh. It is a deal then, but I choose where we go. Deal closed. They stayed there, holding hands and smiling like two fools, and Paris felt a peace that had not visited her chest in a long time. It was as if the pieces of a puzzle she did not even know existed had finally clicked into place. In the following weeks, the two began to walk this new path, something she still did not know if she should call dating or a calculated risk, but which, against all odds, was working out. Benjamin pulled her close to him. His hands were firm but careful as they cupped her face, while his eyes seemed to want to say everything at once. Hi, girlfriend, he murmured, almost like a secret. Hi, boyfriend, she returned, feeling her chest accelerate at a rhythm she could no longer control, and finally he kissed her. It began lightly, a touch of lips that was almost uncertain, as if he were testing if it were truly real. But when Paris sank her fingers into the strands of his hair, the kiss changed. It became deep, urgent, mixing an enormous relief with that desire to make up for the time they had spent only rehearsing. When they pulled away to find air, both had that silly smile of someone who does not quite know where to put so much happiness. That was, Paris tried to formulate the thought, but her voice failed. Perfect, Benjamin interrupted. It was absolutely perfect. They stayed there in silence, feeling the heat of one another with their foreheads resting together. For the first time in ages, Paris felt the noise of the world go quiet. It was a good stillness, a comfort she had not felt in a long time, as if she had finally come home. In the following weeks, the two began to walk this new path, something she still did not know if she should call dating or a calculated risk, but which, against all odds, was working out. At work, they maintained a rigorous distance, and Benjamin treated her like any other employee. In fact, he went as far as being more formal than usual, just to avoid raising suspicions. Paris remained focused, giving her all to prove that she was there on her own merit and not for any other reason. But outside the office, it was a different story. The first real date happened at a small Italian canteen that Paris loved, a place without luxury, with real food and a welcoming atmosphere. Benjamin showed up in jeans again, and Paris began to suspect that he knew the effect he had on her when he set the suit aside. They ate pasta, laughed, and talked about everything. "Confess it already," said Paris, taking a piece of his bread. "What was the most embarrassing moment you ever had?" Benjamin thought for a while before answering. "I fell off a stage while presenting a project to investors. There were about 300 people watching." Paris almost choked on her wine. "I do not believe you did that." "I tripped over the microphone cord and went straight to the floor. The audience went into a deathly silence. He laughed at his own misfortune. I got up, finished speaking with a bloody nose, and still got the money. But the trauma of that embarrassment never went away." "That is impressive, turning a fall like that into a closed deal. And you, what was your biggest blunder?" Paris searched her memory. "Once, at my old job at the coffee shop, I swapped the sugar for salt and made the worst coffee in the world. The customer got so angry that he spat the drink out right in front of me, I swear." Benjamin made a face of disgust. "How horrible. And it does not stop there. It was my second day. And in my nervousness, I dropped a tray of muffins all over my boss, who was wearing a white shirt. How were you not thrown out on the street that very instant?" To this day, I ask myself the same thing. They burst into laughter, and Paris felt that she was truly happy in a light way without complications. The second date was in a park, walking without direction. "Tell me about your family," Paris asked. "You never say anything about them." The expression of Benjamin changed instantly. "There is not much to say. My parents died a few years ago. It was a very heavy period. I am so sorry. I am an only child, and out of nowhere I found myself alone, taking care of a company I barely understood, trying to handle a giant responsibility." He looked into the distance. "I think that is why I am a workaholic. I feel like I need to prove to everyone that I am capable of maintaining what they left behind." Paris squeezed his hand with affection. "You have already proven that, Benjamin. And your parents?" "My mother passed away when I was 5 years old, a victim of cancer, and my father lost himself in drink and became aggressive. My grandmother took me away from there when I was 7 and raised me alone." Paris smiled with a certain sadness. "She is my foundation. Everything I do is for her. Does she know about the two of us?" "She suspects. She seems as if she can read thoughts." Benjamin let out a laugh. "I would love to meet her if you will let me." And so on Sunday, Benjamin Carrington was sitting in the cramped kitchen of Paris, drinking tea with Mrs. Tyra, while the grandmother carried out the most polite and dangerous interrogation Paris had ever seen. "So, Benjamin," Mrs. Tyra began, with a look that seemed to pierce through his soul, "what are your intentions with my granddaughter?" Paris almost choked. "Grandma, what?" "It is a question that needs to be asked." Benjamin did not back down. "My intentions are to care for her as she deserves, to support her plans, and to build something that lasts if she gives me that chance." Mrs. Tyra studied him for a while and then broke into a smile. "I liked that answer. You can stay." "Thank you," Benjamin replied, not quite knowing how to react. "Grandma, he is not a pet waiting for permission to enter," Paris protested. "No, he is better because animals do not make coffee." The grandmother looked at Benjamin. "Do you know anything about coffee?" Yes," Benjamin replied, still trying to process the direct manner of Mrs. Tyra. "Great. Paris has a nasty feud with the stove, so you are already an improvement," the grandmother fired off without mercy. "Hey, I know how to cook very well," Paris protested, feeling her cheeks heat up. "Dear, last week you burned rice with boiling water. I do not even know how that is physically possible, but you found a way." Mrs. Tyra stared at Benjamin with a seriousness that was laughable. It was almost a work of art, a talent for disaster. Benjamin tried to hold back his laughter in every way, but he was failing miserably before the scene. Paris tried to defend herself, her voice growing lower with shame. "The rice was not to blame for anything. You simply left the pot on the fire and went to watch television. It was a decisive chapter," the granddaughter justified. "Of the soap opera," Mrs. Tyra completed, looking at Benjamin. "She almost set the house on fire because of a soap opera." Benjamin finally let out a laugh, a pleasant sound full of affection that filled the room, and somehow in that cramped kitchen with the embarrassing stories and the complaints from Paris, everything seemed to fit, as if he had been part of that routine for years and belonged there as much as they did. 2 months passed, and during a company gala event where Paris took care of every detail behind the scenes, Benjamin found her in an empty hallway. "Paris," he called out, with a tone of voice that seemed heavy and strange. She turned instantly, feeling her pulse quicken, because she could tell something was happening. "What is it? I need to say something now, before I lose the momentum and the courage." The blood of Paris ran cold, and she thought that this was the end, the moment when he would say it was a mistake, that she was not refined enough for his world, or that he had grown tired of trying. "I love you." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment, and the noise of the party vanished. Paris blinked, not believing what she heard. What? "I love you," Benjamin said, taking a step closer and holding her hands firmly. "I know it seems early, that perhaps I should wait a bit, prepare something more special and plan every detail, but Paris, I cannot stand hiding this anymore. You are the most fantastic woman I have ever met. You make me laugh, you make me reflect, and you make me want to evolve. I feel this with all the strength in the world. I love you." Tears appeared without asking for permission, flooding the face of Paris before she could react. "You are an idiot," she let out, her voice thick with crying. Benjamin blinked in confusion, visibly lost with her reaction. That was not exactly the response I was expecting. "A wonderful, beautiful idiot, and everything I ever wanted." Paris pulled him close, grabbing the fabric of his shirt as if she needed a point of support so as not to fall, because I love you too, and I was scared to death of being the first one to admit it. The smile that took over the face of Benjamin was as if the light returned after a heavy storm, and right there, in that hidden hallway of a luxurious ballroom, while the noise of important people talking about business stayed in the background, Benjamin kissed Paris. It was not a movie kiss, there was no background music or slow motion. It was real, imperfect, with Paris still holding a clipboard and Benjamin with his cell phone vibrating insistently in his pocket. But it was perfect precisely because of that. It was a kiss that said, "I choose you, I trust you. I want to know all your bad days and your unfunny jokes," he said softly. "I want to be near when you burn something else on the stove, and also when you conquer everything you desire." When they finally pulled apart, both smiling like fools, Paris whispered, "And now, what do we do?" "Now," Benjamin replied, intertwining his fingers in hers, "we write our story together." As she looked at that man, the same one she had pulled from a burning car months ago without imagining she was saving not only his life, but perhaps her own as well, Paris was certain. She realized she had found something rare and true, a love that was not born of fairy tales or built-up expectations, but of a real choice. It was the meeting of two people full of flaws, deciding they would be imperfect side by side. "Together," she repeated, sealing that promise with another kiss. Somewhere in this universe that looks after destinies and coincidences, someone must have smiled, because sometimes saving one life means, in truth, saving two. And this was exactly that kind of story. The first time Paris stepped into Benjamin's penthouse, she froze right in the entrance hall, which was simply larger than the house where she lived with her grandmother. The marble floor shone so brightly it looked like a mirror. The crystal chandeliers reminded her of something out of a palace, and the windows went from floor to ceiling, showing the entire city down below. "Do you actually live here?" Paris asked, feeling her own voice come out a bit thin from sheer amazement. Benjamin gave a light laugh as he took her coat, acting with the calm of someone born into that world. "On paper, yes, but most of the time I only come here to sleep. It is not what one would call a cozy place. Benjamin, this place looks like a luxury hotel. There is even a sculpture there in the hallway that I am certain I have seen in some museum." "Oh, that piece." He looked at the object with total indifference. "It was a gift from a client, to be honest. I do not even know what it is supposed to be." Paris walked slowly through the living room, touching things with a certain hesitation, feeling the leather of the sofa that was far too soft, the coffee table made of a giant black stone, and the pillows that, alone, must have been worth more than her monthly salary. "This is madness," she murmured to herself. "Complete madness. Do you want me to tell you a secret?" Benjamin approached from behind and hugged her waist. "I do not like this place." Paris turned in his arms, disbelieving what she heard. "How can you not like this? Because it is cold, it has no personality. Everything was chosen by someone who does not even know me, who just received a massive amount of money and the order to impress visitors, but the place has no soul." He looked around with a hint of sadness in his eyes. "There is not a single picture frame, not a true memory, no life." Paris realized right then that all that luxury, that perfection that looked like it belonged in a magazine, was just another way for him to feel alone. "Then let us mess it all up," she said, out of nowhere. "What was that? Let us make this place look like people actually live here." Paris grabbed one of the pillows that were perfectly aligned and threw it on the floor. "There, that is the beginning." Benjamin stood looking at her as if she had lost her mind. "You just threw a $1,000 piece into the middle of the room. And I am going to throw another one." She grabbed one more and tossed it. "Look at that, such rebellion." Then Benjamin burst into laughter, that free laughter that Paris loved so much to hear, and began to grab the other pillows to throw as well. In 5 minutes, the room that was previously impeccable became a total chaos, with blankets out of place and pillows scattered everywhere. Benjamin even took off his shoes and left them in the middle of the way, something that would give the decorator a heart attack just to see. "Much better," Paris declared, flopping onto the sofa any which way without caring about etiquette. "Now it looks like a human being lives here." Benjamin sat beside her and pulled her close to him. "Is your grandmother not going to be worried about you being here?" "I told her before I came, and her words were exactly, 'Enjoy yourself, my daughter, just do not do anything I would do at your age.'" Paris paused, which makes me quite worried, knowing the stories she tells out there. "Your grandmother is a wonderful character." "My grandmother is a hurricane in the body of a 70-year-old lady." Paris snuggled against his chest. "But yes, she is incredible, and she likes you, which is a miracle since she does not take a liking to almost anyone. I feel privileged then. And you should. She made the last boyfriend I tried to introduce leave crying. It was pure drama. She told me that story, and believe me, she spoke with the greatest pride in the world." They stayed like that for a moment, just holding each other, listening to the silence of the city down below, and Paris felt that something finally calmed down inside of her. That distance between their worlds, which sometimes seemed like an impossible abyss to cross, somehow stopped mattering when they were alone. They were just two people trying to figure out how to make it work. Weeks turned into months, and the two created a routine that was theirs alone. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Benjamin would stop by the coffee shop on the way to the firm and always get the same order for her: coffee with milk, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and that blueberry muffin that she loved but pretended she was avoiding to keep up appearances. He would leave everything on her desk before anyone else arrived, always on the down low, without giving anything away to anyone. Paris returned the gesture by leaving papers with horrific drawings hidden in his planner. They were caricatures of Benjamin in silly situations, like him fighting a dragon that looked more like a lizard with wings, or him dressed as a superhero with muscles so exaggerated that they made Brian cry with laughter when he saw them by chance. "Your gift for art is quite different," Benjamin commented one afternoon, analyzing an abstract scribble that was supposed to be him catching a wave. "You are trying to say that I draw poorly. I am saying that even Picasso would be a bit lost trying to understand it, but Picasso was exactly like that. That was his charm, Paris countered, stealing a piece of his bread. I am just an artist whom nobody understands and who deserves this snack as a prize for my effort. The truth was that Benjamin did not throw anything away and kept every single one of those papers in a hidden folder in his desk drawer, far from curious eyes, so as not to break his tough guy reputation. Brian ended up discovering the hiding place one day and did not miss the chance to tease him. The great owner of the whole damn thing, keeping stick figure drawings, mocked his friend. "This is too cute. It is almost embarrassing how sweet it is. Be quiet and just hand me those reports. I will hand them over, but first..." Brian pulled out his phone and took a photo of the folder. "I need to keep this proof to tease you in the future." The social differences, of course, remained there, too large to be ignored. There was the day when Benjamin mentioned he wanted to buy a little house for his days off, and Paris nearly fell over upon discovering that the concept of a little house to him was a mansion with 5 suites on an isolated island. "Benjamin, that is not a weekend house, it is an entire resort. But it is only 5 bedrooms, Paris. Only 5 bedrooms? I grew up in a place with only 1 bedroom, which I still shared with my grandmother. Well, now you can have one all your own, or 5 if you want. You are not understanding what I am saying," she sighed, shaking her head. Or then when they went out to eat, and he ordered the most expensive wine on the list without even looking at the corner of the page, while Paris was still doing math in her head to know if what she had in her wallet would cover her part. "I will take care of the bill," Benjamin said when the waiter brought the paper. "No way, we are going to split it. Paris, you do not need to..." "Benjamin, either we split it or this was our last dinner out. I am being serious." He ended up giving in, even knowing that the amount weighed much more on her pocket than on his. On the way home, Paris was more quiet, looking through the car window. "Am I pushing too hard?" he asked carefully. "With the money issue or with my lifestyle?" "It is not that. It is just that." She tried to find the right way to explain. "Sometimes it seems like we live at different paces. You talk about buying islands while I still get happy when there is a bit of change left at the end of the month, so I do not fall into bank interest." Benjamin stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Paris, I do not care about any of that, not one bit. But I care. It bothers me to know that I will never be able to offer you the standard that you know. It bothers me that your idea of something simple is a restaurant that requires reservations months in advance." "Do you know what the best moment I have had with you so far was?" he asked calmly. "That dinner at that French place that cost a fortune. No, it was when we ate leftover pizza on your sofa, while your grandmother commented on the soap opera in the living room, and the two of you shouted at the television because of the character's stupidity." He held her hands. "There everything was real. It was you, and I would not trade that for any luxury. Not even for that isolated island? Not even for the island. You might just be trying to please me now," she countered, still uncertain. "Paris," he pulled her close, "I would give up everything. The penthouse, the car, the company, and any island. Just to have one more night eating pizza with you and hearing Mrs. Tyra cursing at the TV." He spoke with such firmness, with such absolute certainty, that Paris had no other choice but to believe. "You are so mushy," she grumbled, hiding her face against his chest. "Only with you. Good thing. It would be quite strange to see you declaring yourself like this to just anyone out there. It would be a total waste of time. And you hate wasting time, except when it comes to you. With you, I agree to be totally impulsive and irrational. How lovely, you make me lose my mind. You should write that on a card," she joked, but she was smiling as she spoke. And Benjamin was too, and thus those differences that before seemed like high walls turned into just details, stones in the path that they would learn to avoid instead of reasons to give up. The routine continued steady, between work, hidden meetings, and dinners with her grandmother that were already part of the week, where Benjamin discovered more secrets of Mrs. Tyra's youth than he ever thought existed. One night, while Paris was at home in pajamas, watching some random program and eating ice cream straight from the container, the phone rang. It was Benjamin, of course. "Hi," she answered with her mouth full. "If this is to ask me out, forget it. I am already in my pajamas and I am not leaving from here. Actually, I was thinking of going over there. Now. It is almost 11 at night. I know, but can I stop by?" There was a different weight in his voice, a nervous tone she did not recognize. Did something happen? Paris asked, becoming worried immediately. Everything is fine, I just need to see you. I need to ask you something. Benjamin, you are starting to scare me. It is nothing bad, I swear, it is just something important. Paris looked at her own state, old flannel pajamas with a food print, hair all messy, and probably an ice cream stain on the corner of her mouth. All right, but I warn you now that I look like a horror. To me, you always look beautiful. That is because you like me and your judgment is all wrong. He gave a low laugh. I will be there in 10 minutes. As soon as she hung up, Paris did a quick sweep of the living room, threw the dirty clothes in the hamper, put the ice cream away, and wiped the coffee table. When Benjamin knocked on the door, exactly 10 minutes later, he looked strange. Despite being in casual clothes, his posture gave away that something was out of place. Benjamin Carrington, the fellow who faced meetings with market sharks without sweating, was visibly anxious. "Hi," he said, keeping his hands hidden in his pockets. "Hi," Paris replied, feeling the weight of her pizza print pajamas. "Come in already. Sorry about the mess here and, well, my state as well. Everything is great," he spoke, but he did not even notice the furniture. He only stopped in the center of the small living room and stood staring at Paris with a look that was hard to read. "All right, you are making me scared," she fired off, trying to break the ice. "Tell me already what happened. Did the company go bankrupt? Did you discover some illness or find out that I am an infiltrator for the competition?" "None of that," he breathed deeply, trying to calm himself. "It is just that I have a question to ask you. You already said that on the phone. What question?" It was in that moment that Benjamin began to lower himself, bending his knee right there on top of the linoleum floor. The brain of Paris simply froze. She could not process the scene. "Benjamin, what are you making up?" she whispered. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket, and the heart of Paris gave a jolt in her chest. "Paris Hollis," he began, and his voice failed for a second. "I thought of 1,000 ways to do this. I even reserved that snobby restaurant that you cannot stand. I was going to hire music and had written an enormous text about everything I feel for you." Tears were already rolling down the face of Paris, without her making the slightest effort. "But then I realized that none of that fits us," he continued. "We are not luxury and classical music. We are yesterday's pizza, bad TV shows, these pajamas of yours, and the fact that I totally lose my way when I am by your side." Paris let out a laugh. "You are unreal. I am crazy about you." He opened the box and showed a ring that was the most delicate thing Paris had ever seen, a piece of white gold with a stone that shone as if it had kept a piece of the sky. "Marry me, Paris. Not because our lives are similar, because we know they are not, but because being with you is the only moment in which I feel truly at home. Accept marrying me and let me spend every day showing you that this was the best choice you ever made. Accept messing up my life and my house forever." "Yes," she interrupted, unable to wait any longer. Benjamin stopped for a moment, surprised. I still had more things to say. "Get up from there already, the answer is yes," she laughed, helping him to stand and hanging herself around his neck. "I agree to the pizza, the restaurants, and whatever else you invent." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit that seemed to have been planned by destiny. And Paris stood admiring that shine on her finger while she felt her chest overflow. "How did you find out the size?" she asked, still in shock. "I asked your grandmother to measure it while you were sleeping. My grandmother knew about this," she said, laughing. "It has been about 3 weeks since we have been planning this," he confessed, finally relaxing and hugging her tightly. 3 weeks and she did not say a word?" Paris asked, still shocked by the betrayal. "I made her promise by everything that is most sacred. It took a lot of work," Benjamin confessed, laughing. "That wonderful traitor," Paris murmured while wiping her face. "Is this for real? Am I really engaged? Is it not a dream? If you want to back out, the time is now," he joked, but holding her by the waist. "Do not even think about it, Carrington. Now you are tied to me forever." "That is exactly what I want most," he replied, and she kissed him with a desire that said everything that words could not explain. Mrs. Tyra appeared at the bedroom door in a robe, with a smile that did not fit on her face. Finally, I thought he was going to chicken out at the last second. "Grandma!" Paris exclaimed, feeling her face burn. The lady approached and gave a tight hug to both of them. "Benjamin, now you are truly family." Thank you, Mrs. Tyra. Hearing that is the best thing in the world. Just bring me some handsome great-grandchildren and we are all set. Grandma, we just put the ring on my finger, Paris protested, though laughing along. Then it is best not to waste time, is it not? The elderly woman countered, leaving the room quite victoriously. In that cramped home with the worn floor and walls in need of painting, with Paris in her pajamas and Benjamin with his knee certainly aching from being on the floor, everything was perfect. It was the beginning of something they did not even know how to describe. The organization of the party began as a calm conversation, but soon turned into a clash of opinions. I want something very simple, Paris insisted every time they touched on the subject. Few people, just those close to us and the family. Benjamin agreed immediately. Deal, I will talk to Brian so we can close the list at 50 people. 50? Benjamin, I was thinking of 20 at most. 20 people. He did the math in his head. Paris, just the board of directors of the company has more people than that, and they have known me since I was a boy. They would be devastated. Then do not call the board, she suggested, but she knew it was impossible. Mrs. Tyra also decided to give her opinion. If you are going to get married, let it be for real, she said one morning over coffee in the kitchen. No measly party. It is not going to be measly, Grandma. It is going to be something with meaning, without exaggeration, and small enough to leave out the people who helped raise you. The grandmother arched her eyebrow. You have relatives you do not even know, people from the neighborhood who lent a hand when things got tight. Everyone wants to see you happy. Paris paused to think, and realized that in her attempt not to seem interested in his money, she was forgetting that the wedding was a celebration for everyone she loved. All right, she yielded slowly. Perhaps it does not need to be quite so small. Benjamin held her hand under the table. And what is the size of your dream? She looked at her grandmother and saw that spark of expectation. When I was a girl, I dreamed of those movie weddings, with a long train on the dress, flowers everywhere, a real princess thing, the kind that we think will never happen in real life. Then that is what we are going to do, Benjamin decided, without even thinking twice. But it will cost a fortune, Benjamin. Paris, he made her look deep into his eyes. Let me give you this gift. Let me fulfill the dream you kept for so long. Her eyes became watery again, and she began to think she would spend the months of preparation submerged in tears. Are you sure about this? She asked, trying to control her voice. I have never been so sure of anything in my entire life, he replied firmly. And that was how the idea of something small and hidden turned into an event of another proportion. The chosen place was a 19th century palace, a historic mansion away from the noise of the city, surrounded by immense gardens and a glass chapel that seemed to float among the trees, with halls that resembled the set of a period film. When Paris stepped in there for the first time, she lost her breath. Benjamin, this is too much. It is exaggerated, she said, in awe. It is ideal, he countered affectionately, and it will look even better when you are crossing that hallway. The list ended up reaching 253 people, a middle ground between the quiet she wanted and the obligations his position demanded. There were relatives of Paris she did not even know existed, people coming from France and other places, besides market big shots and childhood friends that Mrs. Tyra found a way to locate. Daniel Hampton was also on the list and almost broke down when he saw the name on the envelope. Did I make you cry again, Daniel? She joked as she delivered the invitation. Be quiet and just give me a hug, he replied with a choked voice, squeezing her tightly. The search for the dress was a soap opera in its own right. Paris went through several stores and tried on dozens of models, almost losing her mind before finding the right one. It was not what she had drawn in her mind, nor the most expensive one in the window. But when she saw herself in the mirror with that lace bodice and the tulle skirt that looked like a cloud with meters of train, it all made sense. It is this one, she whispered, unable to look away from her reflection. The lady from the shop smiled at the scene. You look stunning. It feels like I stepped out of a fairy tale book. You are the star of this story, the woman he chose. Paris cried, of course, since she could no longer resolve anything regarding the wedding with dry eyes. Mrs. Tyra, who did not miss a single fitting, wiped the corner of her eye, not wanting anyone to see. Your mother would be radiant seeing you like this. Grandma, do not start. I will ruin my whole face." "What face? You have not even put on your makeup yet. It is preventive crying." She tried to laugh. The months flew by between choices of flowers, like the white roses and peonies that she liked so much, and the menu that mixed American seasonings with French cuisine, a request from him to honor both families. The cake had 4 tiers and cost a small fortune, leaving Paris dizzy with the prices. "All of this is an absurdity," she commented upon seeing the bills. "It is our day," Benjamin cut the subject short, "and you deserve the best I can give you." Brian, who became a great partner, was the best man and took the mission seriously, throwing a bachelor party that Benjamin only summarized by saying that nobody ended up in jail. Meanwhile, the bridal shower for Paris was filled with laughter and stories from Mrs. Tyra, who told so many adventures from the past that Paris had to ask her to stop. "Grandma, enough, I do not need to know these details of your youth." "And why not? I am elderly, but I am not in formaldehyde," the old woman countered, making everyone laugh. Suddenly the week of the wedding arrived, and sleep for Paris vanished. She spent the early hours staring at the ceiling, scared to death it would rain, that she would trip on her dress, or that her mind would go blank during the vows she had rewritten 1,000 times. Benjamin, as wired as she was, sent messages in the middle of the night. 3:47 in the morning, Benjamin wrote. "Still awake?" Paris replied, "Still have not been able to close my eyes." Benjamin wrote that he also could not sleep. "I am a bundle of nerves." "You? Nervous?" Paris countered. "The guy who runs a billion-dollar company. Running the company I do with my eyes closed, but marrying the woman of my life is terrifying." "You are so mushy, Benjamin. I am just being sincere. Now try to rest, my love. In 3 days you will be my wife." "Great. Now I definitely will not sleep," she replied. "That is understandable," he concluded. The morning of the wedding emerged with a clear sky and much sun, which was a true relief since the weather had been overcast all week. Paris jumped out of bed at the hotel where she was staying with her grandmother, and panic hit instantly. "I am not ready, Grandma." "Calm down, girl. There are 6 hours left before the ceremony begins." "Only 6 hours. That is little time," Paris shouted. Mrs. Tyra laughed and pulled her granddaughter into a tight hug. "Breathe deeply. You are going to look wonderful, and he is going to break down when he sees you. It will be everything exactly as you dreamed. And what if I take a fall on the way? If you fall, you get up and keep the dance going. That is how our family does it." The hair and makeup staff arrived at 9 in the morning, transforming the room into a true salon. Paris stayed there, trying not to have a fit while they painted her nails, set her hair in perfect waves, and applied every layer of makeup with all the care in the world. "You are trembling all over," the makeup artist commented. "I am terrified. Is this normal?" "It is the most common thing for a bride. But try to relax. You are going to look beautiful." And the result was breathtaking. When she finally put the gown on, with the assistance of 3 people because the dress had a vast number of buttons down the back, Paris found it difficult to believe what she saw in the mirror. She looked like a different person. She was radiant, as if she had stepped directly off a magazine cover. "My God, Paris," her grandmother whispered, with her hands to her face. "You are stunning. I look like a real princess." "You are a princess, his princess, and that is all that matters now." On the other side of the estate, in another house, Benjamin was also a nervous wreck. "What if she gives up on everything?" he asked Brian, who was struggling to tie his necktie because the groom's hands would not stop shaking. "She is not going to give up, stop it. But what if she realizes the truth? What if she notices she deserves someone better? What if—" "Benjamin," Brian held him by the shoulders. "Give it a rest. That woman is crazy about you. She is not going to go anywhere. Now stop this nonsense and let us go because you have a wedding to attend. You are horrible at trying to calm people down." "Maybe so, but it worked. Look at that. You stopped shaking." At 15 o'clock, the guests began to take their places. The garden had turned into a movie set, with flower arches everywhere, white chairs with silk bows, and a path of petals leading to the glass chapel, which sparkled under the afternoon light. Soft music played as everyone settled in, and Paris watched everything from a distance, hidden, feeling her heart beat so hard it felt like it would leap out of her mouth. "Ready?" asked Mrs. Tyra, who looked exceptionally elegant in a peach-colored dress. "No," Paris confessed. "I am scared to death, but I am ready at the same time. Does that make sense? Not only does it make sense, but that is how it should be. Her grandmother held her hands. Your father is not here to walk you down the aisle, and your mother cannot see this moment, but you can be certain that they are overflowing with pride for the woman you have become. The tears came, but she took care not to smudge anything and hugged her grandmother with all her strength. Thank you for everything, for raising me and for being here with me. I would not miss this for anything in this world, my girl. The music changed its tone and the march began to play. The time has come, Mrs. Tyra said, offering her arm to her granddaughter. Let us go get you married. The doors opened all at once, and Paris finally saw what awaited her. 253 people stood up at the same instant, turning their faces toward her, while the scattered flowers transformed the garden into a true paradise. At the end of the aisle, positioned under an arch of white roses, Benjamin awaited her. He wore an impeccable black suit with a vest and his tie perfectly aligned, but what made the heart of Paris skip a beat was his face. Benjamin was crying. They were not hidden tears, he cried openly, with a smile so wide it seemed to illuminate everything around him, letting the weeping flow freely down his face. Paris began to walk, with slow and calculated steps, squeezing the arm of Mrs. Tyra as if it were her only point of balance. Each step seemed to last an eternity and at the same time pass in the blink of an eye. One could see many people moved by emotion along the way. When she finally stepped onto the altar, her grandmother gave a kiss on her cheek and whispered, "Be very happy, my girl," and then she handed the hand of Paris to Benjamin. The touch was like an electric shock, something familiar that brought an immediate peace. "Hi," Benjamin said softly with a choked voice. "Hi," Paris replied, feeling her own face all wet. "You are crying. You look too wonderful. How could I not cry?" The celebrant began the ceremony, but Paris could barely pay attention to the words, for she was too busy engraving every detail of the face of Benjamin. When the time came for the vows, he wiped his eyes before beginning to speak. "Paris Hollis," he began, with a trembling voice but full of conviction. "When we first met, I was literally on fire, and in a way I still am. You transformed my life in a way that I never thought possible. You made me laugh. You made me question everything, and you made me want to be someone better. You take my scattered pieces and make everything make sense just by being around." He squeezed her hands tightly. "I promise to love you on sunny days and in storms, when you are lounging on the sofa in pajamas, and when you look like this, breathtaking. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, and your biggest fan. I promise never to stop trying to make you smile, and I promise every single day to choose you, today, tomorrow, and for the rest of my life." Paris could no longer see almost anything because of the tears. When it was her turn, her voice failed right at the first sentence. She took a deep breath, dried her face, and tried again. "Benjamin Carrington," she said, trying to maintain her calm. "You were supposed to be just a stranger I pulled from an accident, but you became my world, my safe harbor, and my future. You prove to me daily that I deserve to be loved, not despite my flaws, but because of every single one of them. You give me the courage to dream big and the security to know that I can make mistakes." She held his hands with such force that her fingers turned white. "I promise to love you with every imperfect part I have. I promise to be by your side in any fight and to make you laugh, especially when things get difficult. I will never stop choosing you, always, without any doubt or regret, forever and ever." There was not a soul in the garden who was not moved. The celebrant, also with a somewhat shaky voice, asked for the rings. Brian handed over the white gold bands, engraved with their initials and the date of that day. When Benjamin slid the jewelry onto her finger, his hands would not stop trembling. When it was the turn of Paris, she smiled through her weeping. "That being so," the celebrant announced, "I declare you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Benjamin pulled Paris close, holding her face with a delicacy that made the tears flow again. "Hi, wife," he whispered. "Hi, husband," she returned in a whisper, and immediately after they kissed, while the guests applauded and made a great celebration of it. It was everything the way it should be, not because everything went impeccably, especially since the Veil of Paris decided to snag on the button of the suit of Benjamin, and they lost about 2 minutes trying to release it while they laughed, and the first official photo as husband and wife showed the two of them with messy hair and faces, swollen from so much crying. But it was perfect because it looked like them. The party took place in a hall that seemed to have come straight from an ancient palace, with giant chandeliers, tables with flower arrangements, and a 4-tier cake so beautiful that Paris felt sorry to cut it. "This is a work of art," she commented softly. "It is a cake," Benjamin said, trying to be practical. "A very beautiful cake, but it is still food. You may cut it." The first dance was to a song they handpicked, none of those traditional waltzes, but a song that played on the radio during one of the first trips they took together, when they were still getting to know each other. Benjamin led her through the middle of the ballroom, and Paris, who spent weeks afraid of stepping on his foot, finally relaxed and let herself be carried away by the moment. "We actually got married," she said, resting her face on his shoulder. "We did," he confirmed, with a tone of voice full of pride. "You are my wife now, and you are my husband. I will never grow tired of hearing that. It is a good thing, because now you are stuck with me. That is exactly where I want to be." Mrs. Tyra was the queen of the dance floor. She danced with about 12 different men and did not stop for a second, showing that at 72 years old, she had more stamina than many young people. When it finally came time to leave, already very late at night, they passed through a corridor of guests holding those glowing sparkler wands, lighting the way to the car. "Ready to go?" Benjamin asked when they reached the vehicle, which was full of Tide cans and a "Just Married" sign. Paris looked back one last time, seeing the people still celebrating, her grandmother smiling with wet eyes, and that place which was now part of her story. "Ready," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Let us go home. Let us begin our life for real." "We already began," she corrected, kissing him under the starry sky while the sparks glowed around them. "This right here is only the beginning of the next chapter." And that beginning of life could not have been more exciting. The first years of marriage were a true school on how to share the same roof, no longer being just quick visits or weekend meetings. They went to live in Benjamin's penthouse. Paris brought her simple things that seemed to vanish in that gigantic space, but Benjamin insisted on saying that her presence, with her books scattered about, clothes tossed aside, and notes stuck everywhere, was what had been missing for the place to have life. "Now this has become a home," he commented, observing the living room that Paris had turned upside down, spreading photos, blankets, and colorful pillows everywhere. "To me it became a mess," she countered, but she could not hide the smile of satisfaction. "Well, it is the most beautiful mess I have ever seen." Mrs. Tyra appeared there constantly, almost always without warning, and had a habit of knocking on the door at the most intimate moments for the couple. "Grandma, for the love of God, you have to call before coming," Paris would complain, trying to compose herself. "But I did call. You two are the ones who did not answer," the elderly woman would reply with the boldest face in the world. "Were you too busy doing what?" "We are not going to get into that subject, Grandma. I only want to know when my great-grandchildren are arriving." "Grandma, stop it." Deep down, Paris thought about it too, but without any rush. She was 26 years old and wanted to enjoy her marriage, travel the world, and focus on her career before growing the family. And they traveled a lot. Benjamin took her to see places she only saw on television, such as France and the paradisiacal beaches of the Maldives, where the water was so transparent it did not even seem real. At the company, Paris did not stop rising. Daniel promoted her first to manager and later to a senior leadership position. Over time, the hallway gossip stopped and everyone began to respect her work, seeing that she was not there because of privilege, but because of competence. "You put on a show in that meeting," Benjamin praised, proud, after a presentation she gave to investors. "You say that because you are my husband. I am biased. It is true, but the numbers do not lie." Not everything was perfect, of course, once a gossip website published that Paris had married for the money, which left her devastated and with her nerves on edge for days. "Do not pay any mind to that," Benjamin advised, trying to calm her. "People are always going to invent lies. But they are saying that I am a gold digger and that you are a fool who fell into my trap." "Paris," he held her face with delicacy. "I know who you are, you know who you are, and those who like us know too. The rest is just idle talk to get clicks. I hate this kind of exposure. I know, But you are much greater than all that noise, you always have been. And she truly was. The dust settled and life followed its course. They bought a retreat in the countryside, a simple and pleasant country house to escape the rush, where they could be just Benjamin and Paris without positions or titles. She set up a vegetable garden and discovered she had a way with plants while he tried to learn how to barbecue, and even if the result was not always good, she loved his effort. On a warm spring night, while they rested on the porch watching the sun set, Paris felt something different. It was nothing external, but a click inside her, a new desire that began to take hold. "Benjamin?" she called softly. "Yes?" "I think my time has come. I am ready." He shifted his eyes from the garden and faced her, not quite understanding. "Ready for what, exactly?" "For our family to truly grow." Benjamin almost let the wine glass slip through his fingers. Are you serious?" "Very serious. I want a child, a baby of our own," Paris said, holding his hand tightly. "I want to see a miniature version of you running around here. I want to face the sleepless nights, the diapers, and all that good mess that comes along with it." Benjamin pulled her into a kiss so heavy with affection that Paris felt a pleasant warmth run through her entire body. "Then let us order that baby," he whispered against her lips. "Now?" "And why not?" "Because we are on the porch, and someone might see. There is no one within a 2-mile radius, Paris." "That is true," she agreed, laughing. Discovering that the plan had worked only 2 months later was a shock. Paris was locked in the penthouse bathroom, staring at that test with 2 very distinct pink lines, unable to move from the spot. "Benjamin," she called, her voice coming out in a high pitch that did not even sound like hers. He appeared at the door in a jump, still in pajamas, as it was a Saturday morning. "What happened? Are you all right?" It was then that he saw the object in her hand and froze. "Is it what I am thinking?" "Positive," Paris confirmed. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The shout that Benjamin gave was so loud that it must have echoed through the entire building. In the next second, he was already lifting Paris into the air, spinning with her through the living room, amidst laughter and tears of joy. "I am going to be a father. Benjamin, put me on the floor. I am going to feel sick. Sorry, it is the nerves." He let her go slowly, but the smile would not leave his face. "A child of our own. I cannot even believe it. Are you truly happy?" "Happy is an understatement, Paris. I am on cloud 9, completely foolish." He knelt down and gave a kiss to her belly, which had not changed at all yet. "Hi, little one, Daddy is already here waiting for you. He does not even have ears to hear you yet, you know. I do not care. I want him to feel that he is already loved." Telling Mrs. Tyra was exactly the spectacle they imagined. "About time," she bellowed, giving her granddaughter a hug that almost left her without air. "I thought you two were going to keep stalling forever. Grandma, we have only been married for 3 years. 3 years would have been enough to have made about 3 grandchildren already. That is not how it works, Mrs. Tyra." "Well, it should be." The pregnancy, to be honest, was a huge challenge. The first trimester was marked by nausea that gave no relief. Paris spent weeks living on saltine crackers, unable to look at any other food. Benjamin was a golden partner. He held her hair when the sickness hit, searched for the strangest foods in the middle of the night, and did not complain when she cried over any little thing. "Sorry, I am a disaster these days," she sobbed one night, just because a shoe would not go on her foot. "You are generating a life, Paris," he said, wiping her face. "You are wonderful, not a disaster." The following phase was more peaceful. The nausea vanished, and the energy returned in full force. The belly began to show, that little round curve that left Benjamin fascinated. He spoke to the belly all the time. "Good morning, son. Daddy is going to work now, but he will be right back. Mommy ate vegetables today, so you better grow up strong. Uncle Brian sent his love. He is dying to see you." Paris found it all very sweet, even if it was a bit much. "Benjamin, the baby does not understand anything yet. That is what you think. It is what the doctors say. Doctors do not know everything." When the 5-month ultrasound showed it was a boy, Benjamin could not hold back his emotion. "A big boy," he whispered, looking at that blurred image on the screen. "We are going to have a boy." "Noah," Paris said suddenly. "What?" "I want his name to be Noah. It means peace, rest, and after everything we went through, I think it fits." Benjamin kissed her forehead. "Noah Carrington. It sounds perfect." The last few months were exhausting. Paris was feeling enormous, heavy, and with a mood that swung more than anything. Her feet swelled, her back ached, and sleep vanished because Noah decided that the early hours of the morning were the perfect time to practice kicking. "Your son will not let me sleep," she complained one night. "Our son," he corrected, feeling the kicks with his hand on her belly. "No, right now he is only yours. He inherited this never-ending energy of yours." Even with all the discomfort, there was magic in the air. Preparing the nursery, painting the walls a light blue, and assembling the crib with all the care made it finally feel real. "Do you think we are going to manage?" she asked while they tried to assemble a piece of furniture that looked like a jigsaw puzzle. "To be honest, we are going to mess up a lot," Benjamin admitted. "We are going to be exhausted, lose our patience, and wonder what we got ourselves into. That does not help at all," she complained, feeling the weight of the responsibility. "But," he continued calmly, "we are going to love this boy more than anything in the world, and that has to be worth something." "That is worth everything," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. Labor decided to show up 3 days earlier than expected, around 4 in the morning, when Paris woke up feeling everything wet around her. "Benjamin," she gave him a shake to wake him up. "My water broke." He jumped so high that he nearly landed on the floor. "What? Now? Already? But already?" "Yes, Benjamin, now! Hurry up!" she shouted, feeling the first sharp pain. What followed was pure desperation. Benjamin, who had rehearsed every step of that departure in his head, simply forgot where he had tucked the car keys. "Where are the damn keys?" "On the door hook, where they always are. They are not here, Paris." "Benjamin, I am having a contraction. Find those keys now," she bellowed from the bedroom. The keys were in his pants pocket, as was to be expected. The drive to the hospital was tense, with Paris trying to control her breathing and Benjamin driving recklessly through traffic because of his nerves. "I am very scared," she admitted between sighs. "I am too," he confessed, gripping the steering wheel. "But we are going to go through this together, you and I." "You and I," she repeated, trying to calm herself. At the hospital, the atmosphere changed, and everything became too real. The medical team appeared quickly and took Paris to the delivery room. Benjamin did not let go of her hand for a single second, accompanying the pains that only increased and the hours that seemed to have no end. "You are doing very well," he said, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "You are almost there." "I feel like I am going to die, Benjamin." "You are not going to die. You are the strongest woman I have ever seen in my life." "I hate you for putting me through this," she grumbled, squeezing his hand tightly. "You love me. I know you do. At this exact moment, I hate you very much." "I understand perfectly," he replied without letting go of her hand. After 14 hours that pushed the endurance of Paris to the limit, the doctor announced it was the final moment. On the next contraction, she would have to put all her strength there. Paris focused and did what was needed. She pushed until she felt her muscles were going to lock, until she thought she had no breath left. And then, out of nowhere, came that wonderful sound, a loud cry full of life and health. "It is a beautiful boy," the doctor announced, lifting the little baby who was still all messy. But he was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. It was Noah. They placed him right on the lap of Paris, and she stayed there, looking at that tiny face, the squinted eyes and the restless little hands, feeling like her chest was going to explode with so much love. "Hi, my love," she whispered, letting the tears fall without fear. "Hi, Noah. Mommy and Daddy are here." Benjamin was in tears as well, with one hand on his son and the other on the head of Paris. "You were incredible," he said, with his voice completely broken. "I do not even have words to say how proud I am." "We created a life," Paris spoke, "a whole human being, the most perfect boy the world has ever seen." Noah chose that exact moment to let out a little noise that sounded like a hiccup mixed with a sigh. They both laughed instantly. "All right, maybe he is not totally perfect," Paris joked, "but to us he is." The first weeks at home were a mix of paradise and extreme exhaustion. It was wonderful to see every face he made or to feel the little squeeze of his fingers on theirs. But sleep had become a luxury item they no longer possessed. "When was the last time we slept more than 2 hours?" Paris asked one early morning. "Or was it morning?" She had already lost track of time while breastfeeding Noah, who decided that at 3:20 in the morning it was time to be awake. "I think it was on Tuesday," Benjamin replied, looking like a zombie while trying to burp the little one. "Or was it on Monday? I do not even know what day it is anymore. I do not have the slightest idea either. Are we really this bad as parents? We are just dead tired." Luckily, they had Mrs. Tyra. She would drop by almost every day and would arrive bossing everyone around, with the experience of someone who had already raised many people. "You two, right now, to bed," she would order. "I will take care of the little one. Grandma, you do not need to trouble yourself. Paris, go lie down now, or am I going to have to take you by force?" No one had the courage to go head-to-head with Mrs. Tyra when she spoke that way, and rest was what they needed most to continue that journey. What left Paris most dazed was the strength of what she felt. She knew she would love her son, but she did not expect it to be something so raw. A love that made her want to keep Noah in a protective bubble and at the same time give the entire world to him. "Is it normal to feel this whole thing?" she asked the doctor during a routine appointment. "It is the most normal thing there is," the pediatrician guaranteed, smiling welcome to the world of mothers. Noah grew quickly the way babies do. The first smile came at 2 months, and it was directed right at Benjamin, who did not shut up about it for an entire week. The first laugh happened at 3 months when Paris made a silly face, and the sound was so clear and joyful that she ended up crying with happiness. Then came the first rolls in bed at 4 months, and the first tooth at 6, which brought along plenty of crying and sleepless nights. Every small achievement was celebrated as if they were the first parents in history to go through it. "Are we exaggerating our excitement?" Paris asked after taking about 1,000 photos of Noah trying to bite his own foot. "We most certainly are," Benjamin admitted, "but I do not care at all what people think. That is a good thing, because I'm going to take a whole bunch more right now." On the 1-year birthday of Noah, they threw a party that almost rivaled the wedding in terms of production because Paris wanted the first year to be unforgettable. Looking around, they saw the house full, with Mrs. Tyra holding her great-grandson and trying to make him wave to the cameras, Brian playing the clown, and even Daniel Hampton making faces to see if the boy would laugh. "We made it," Paris said softly to her husband while they observed the mess. "Made what?" "All of this." She pointed to the living room and to the life they had built. "Our family, this love, a wonderful son, and a life that I never thought was meant for me." Benjamin hugged her from behind and kissed her face. "You deserve every bit of it. We deserve it," she corrected together. While they looked at their son, Gu miracle that the two of them created, surrounded by people who truly cared for them, Paris felt a good tightening in her chest. It was gratitude for everything, for the difficult path to get there, for the struggles, and for the people she found, especially for that man who began as a stranger in a burning car and became her best friend and the love of her life. "I love you," she said, with the certainty of someone who would speak those words for the rest of her days. "I love you too," Benjamin replied, "today, tomorrow, and forever." With her son laughing in her lap and an enormous future ahead, Paris Carrington was certain that finally she had found her place in the world, not because everything was perfect, but because, even with the imperfection, it was exactly where she belonged, with the family she chose, with the love she fought to keep, with the life she never stopped building. And that, in the end, was the only story that mattered, their story. And it was still being written, one wonderful, challenging, imperfect day at a time.
There's something I never asked you, but always wanted to know. How did you know my name that night?
Do you want the truth?
I do.
Your name was embroidered on your bag. Very visible.
You're kidding.
Your name was right there, stitched in the bag. Hard not to notice when someone walks into fire for you.
And here I was creating wild theories.
I only saw what mattered.